I want to welcome you to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. I want to point out our fancy warning graphic here. It says, warning, the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. I want to welcome you to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I am one of your hosts. Some of you may already know who I am. Those of you who do not, I am a professional illustrator and graphic designer. I've been doing it for nearly 30 years, or getting right darn close to it. I've worked for a lot of fun things some people have heard of, such things as Batman Incorporated, Justice League of America, Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, and Red Skirts. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Eric Alexander, otherwise known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14. That's not Bass God. That's Bass God, like a bass guitar. And I am the co-host of the Retro Rogues live show. I am also the chief financial officer of Bad Bob Productions, which is a small production company in Arizona. And I'm also the associate producer of the feature film Occupants, which features Star Trek Picard, or Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo, and is currently streaming on Tubi for free.
Very cool. So we start off every show normally with the pop culture news segment. However, tonight we're going to do something just a little bit different because we encourage everyone to comment during the show to actually become a member of our Rogues Gallery. Eric and I talked about it, and we think that's what we're going to call the wonderful people who actually comment during the show. You will become an official member of our Rogues Gallery. That's kind of fun. Now, along those lines, we usually, to encourage people to actually comment during the show, we offer a free sketch card. These are original pieces of art. I want to announce the winner of last week's show. This was a Mighty Mouse sketch card. The winner of this card was actually Clyde Neville. Congratulations, Clyde. We'll be getting this piece of original art to you. Again, this is original artist proof. This is as part of the Cartoon Classic Sketch Card, or actually trading card series. And this was one of the official artist proof sketch cards from that series I worked on. So I need some help. I need some help tonight. So we have 3 possibilities for tonight's show for commenting during the show. And I need you, our viewers, our listeners. Well, listeners can't pick because the contest will be open by the time you're listening to this. However, if you're watching the show right now, I need your help to pick one. So we've got a couple different options here. This is Speedy from the Arrow television series. This is an original hand-drawn sketch card. This is from the official Cryptozoic Arrow Season 4 trading card set. You can tell it's official because it's got a little hollow foil thing there in the corner. This is possibly one of them. The other one we might do tonight is actually Brainiac. This is from Superman the Legend series. Again, this is original art. This is one of one, official from Superman the Legend. So we've got Brainiac. This is the superpowers robotic version. And then the last one we have possibly for tonight is going to be from the DC Supervillains set. This is Black Adam. This is actually one of my favorite cards I've ever drawn. So this is an original hand-drawn sketch card. You can see it's signed on the back by me. This is an artist proof. You tell it's official by the little hollow foil thingy on the corner there. This is another possibility. So anyone who's hopefully watching right now, I need some help. I need people to chime in on the chat. I need to know which one of these we should actually give away during tonight's show. So hopefully someone is watching and they'll come in, they'll comment, and they'll say, oh, do Black Adam, or do Speedy, or do Brainiac. I'll do this again later in the show one more time. And if I don't hear from anyone, I'll just pick one out of the pile. All right, so enough about that. Let's go ahead and let's get on with the show.
I did want to say that although my vote doesn't count in this one, I really like that Black Adam. That Black Adam is really cool. My father's favorite and my brother's favorite superhero is the original Captain Marvel, Shazam, as they now seem to call him, but like that Black Adam quite a bit. And it looks like we already have a comment.
Oh.
Arrow. And
Arrow.
Clyde right off the bat. He takes the lead.
All right.
Welcome, Clyde.
So welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. So we've got one vote for Arrow. All right, so we'll see whatever.
And again, Clyde, don't worry because my vote doesn't count. I'm not involved. So I just wanted to put that out there because I grew up with a lot of Captain Marvel around me.
I actually just finished 2 sketch card sets. Eric knows about this because he's seen a couple of preview images. I almost killed myself doing these sets, but I just finished actually 2 sketch card sets. I can't really say what they are. Hopefully here pretty soon I'll be able to talk about those. But thank you for your vote, Clyde, for Speedy from Arrow. So again, anyone else who's watching, please chime in and let us know what you might like to see. We'll talk about that again a little bit later in the show. So let's go ahead and get started, Eric. So if you don't mind sharing my screen.
You do realize that we're starting with Picard, right?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
For those that don't know, we have had a format change with our show. We do our feature segments now, one at the beginning and one at the end. So we kind of have like a nice sandwich, if you will. And our goal is to do sort of the more modern thing that we're reviewing, or the more topical thing that we're reviewing first. And then we try to go a little bit more retro at the end. And so for people that aren't aware of what's going on the show today, we are having a review of Picard Episode 7, Nepenthe. That'll be our first topic. That's our first feature topic. And then later on, after we do our news segment and streaming war segment, we will do a review of the Power of Grayskull documentary, which is currently on Netflix. That's a He-Man documentary. So those are going to be the 2 main topics tonight. And we are going to be starting out with Picard, Star Trek Picard, Nepenthe.
And I am ready now. Sorry about that.
No problem. Like as I mentioned to the viewers, this is a new format for us, so we're still trying to get comfortable with it. So just bear with us as we do that. So we always try to start out with non-spoilers, general impressions, things like that, in case any of you who haven't seen the episode don't want to be spoiled. We can just give you some of our impressions and things that we think about it, and then you can tune out for a while, and you can come back during the news segment if you want. So, Dave, let's start off with you with general impressions for Star Trek Nepenthe, and I think I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Well, let's see. General impressions of the show. I liked this episode. I didn't love it, but I'd have to say it's probably one of the better episodes. When we get into the spoilers and a deep dive, I'll talk more about what it was about the episode that I didn't particularly care for. But I really enjoyed. I think this is no spoiler. Anyone who's seen any of the trailers know that Riker and Troy is in this particular episode, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. But I can't really get into the reasons for why until we actually get into the spoiler part of the conversation about this particular episode of Star Trek Picard. That's my overall impressions. I'd have to say, rating it against the other episodes, I'd have to say this one is probably up there with the premiere, but not quite there for me personally. So tell me, Eric, what did you think about this episode of Star Trek Picard?
I'm a little bit more in the middle. This episode obviously has gotten a lot of buzz. This isn't a spoiler because if you don't know this, it's like you're not even interested in the show. This episode obviously was highly anticipated because we finally get to see Riker and Troy in the Star Trek Picard world and see what they've kind of been up to and all that good stuff. So it was highly anticipated because of that. I had a sort of mixed reaction to that homecoming. But one thing that I will say, and I don't think this is a spoiler, because I think people are wondering about this, especially people that are kind of like, should I watch this? Shouldn't I? I don't know how to feel about this. Maybe you didn't like the last episode or you really hated episode 5 like I did. But the one thing that I will say is that it's nice that Riker and Troy aren't just a cameo. So that's something that I think a lot of people going into this will want to know. Whether it's worth watching or not is, hey, was this just a cameo? Are they, that kind of thing? I won't say, whether they lived or died. That I think would be a spoiler, or what the exact situation is until we get into the spoilers and the deep dive. But just for people wondering about that, it's not just a cameo. So they do feature prominently in the episode. Other than that, the other thing is, I constantly harp on the issue that Picard is a little disjointed as a narrative. We've got like 3 different settings now going on with the characters. And I was actually really looking forward to the fact that, in the last episode, we kind of were like, it looked like we were finally going to get everybody together. And that didn't happen. That didn't happen. And instead, we actually got a bigger separation, because before, Picard has always basically been like two storylines going on. One storyline is basically the story of Picard getting his crew together, kind of explaining who these people are, kind of setting the chess pieces, if you will. And the other one's all about Soji and the affair that she's having with this Zot Vash agent. She doesn't know it was a Zot Vash agent. And if you don't know what Zot Vash is, that's the Super Tal Shiar. So you've had these two storylines that are kind of, happening separately. There's no real interaction between the two of them until episode 6. And so I was really looking forward to the fact that we kind of get everybody together, but that's not what happens. Now we have even more separation with the characters, and weird things are going on. And for me, it really gives a very uneven tone to the episode. It's something that's kind of like a, just straight up off-putting to me, because I don't, all these different narratives going on at the same time, it gets confusing. And then you have like wildly different tones. We had one of our viewers talked about, this is Star Trek, the bipolar frontier. And I really feel like that's the way that this episode is. It's like, it's just all over the place. Again, it goes into some really dark places. And it just seems like they are absolutely determined to make Star Trek Picard as like hopeless and as damaged and as neurotic as possible. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Even with saying all that, it doesn't mean that I hated the episode. It's not on the same level as episode 5 in terms of being that bad. Well, I have to take that back, because there is a death of a major character in this episode. That's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's not. You don't know which one. There are multiple major characters in this show, so that might actually make you want to see it and say, well, who died? That kind of a thing. I wasn't very happy about that, about the death. We'll get into that in the deep dive. But overall, I think Picard has a problem with having a focused narrative. Bobby just chimed in. Bobby, thank you for chiming in. He said, yep, this one was scattered. And literally, it's scattered. Says Katie, Katie, your comment as well says, I was talking to my mother and she told me that she doesn't even really want to watch the show. To be honest, I understand. In her words, quote, everything is dark. Death, no camaraderie, no final frontier. And Katie, that's kind of how I'm feeling about the show in a lot of ways myself. Now, I know that, Katie, that you might like the next episode just because of something that I saw in the preview, and we'll talk about that in the deep dive. You might be interested in the next episode. But like Bobby said, I feel like it very much is, the scattered frontier, if you will. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So I guess since we're good there, I guess we should just go ahead and get into the spoiler talk. Because like I said, I quite liked a lot about this episode, but there were some things I did not like, but I can't really get into those too much in detail until we actually get into the deep dive spoiler conversation. For the people
I think even without going, I think it's not really considered a spoiler to say this. Did you like the appearance of Riker and Troy? Did you feel like that story worked? Did you like it?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I have some problems with it, but I did like seeing them quite a bit.
Because I think a lot of people, that's what they really want to know. You know what I mean? They just, even if they haven't seen the episode, they want to know, well, were Troy and Riker treated well? Do they have like a satisfying story? I think that's something a lot of people want to know before they even watch the episode, before they even give the time of day.
I enjoyed seeing them, and I like I said, I have some issues with it, but I did enjoy seeing them quite a bit. And that's kind of a big high point for me with this episode, was seeing them.
Do you think hardcore TNG fans are going to like what they did with Riker and Troy and the whole interaction? Do you think they're going to like that?
I am going to say it's probably going to be a mixed bag. Because
I'm going to agree with you there.
I could see where some people would just enjoy seeing them because it was great to see them kind of back at those characters. But at the same point, too, the fact that at some point, at one point I was expecting Riker to say something that was going to turn out they were on a holodeck, like a holodeck, and Nepenthe was actually a starship. For half a second, I thought he was going to, because when he said, well, I can't get into it until we get in spoiler conversation, but there was a point in which I thought when he started.
No, that's a good segue. Let's get into spoilers there, because I didn't see that moment, and I'm curious what moment you're talking about, because I actually would have really liked that. That would have been awesome. That would have been freaking awesome.
Yeah, the moment I was thinking of is when he said shields up, and the computer started responding, stuff started to happen. For half a second, I was like going, "Oh shoot! This is all on a holodeck, and they're on a starship. Nepenthe's a starship." And I was really excited for half a second. I was like, this is going to be so cool if they're actually on a starship, and this is their little house on the prairie simulation that they run for fun because they want their daughter to know what it's like to live on Earth.
As Katie says, like everyone says, Troy Riker equals little house on Nepenthe.
Yeah, I tell you, like there was a point there where I was expecting for us to pull out.
The shields up?
Yeah, I thought we were going to pull out. We were going to see some brand new killer awesome starship. It was going to turn out that Riker was still in command. This was his ship. And and basically when Picard knew he needed help, he went to Riker because not only did he know Riker was in a position to help him, but he knew he was his friend. You know what I mean? Like I really thought that Picard went there because he knew.
I think one thing we're gonna have to do. I'm gonna pitch this like live to you right now. I think at the end of this show, we should do like a special recap episode where we get some other people that are into creating content or writing, and we actually do our own Star Trek Picard writers room, and we talk about all the missed opportunities and all the things we would have done if we were in that writers room. I think that'd be fun because you come up with some great ideas, and that's an awesome idea. That would have been a great segue when you did the shields up, and all of a sudden you realize he's on a freaking ship. You know what I mean? Nepenthe isn't a planet. Nepenthe is a ship. You know what I mean? And oh man, that makes me excited. Just talking about that makes me excited.
Could you imagine when he said that his shield's up, and then all of a sudden you pan back, you realize it's a starship, and you get the dun 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 dun, like the classic theme, and it's this really killer, brand new starship we've never seen before, and it says USS Nepenthe on the hull, and you realize this is Riker's ship.
That would have been so awesome.
I would have freaking lost it. I would have friggin' lost it because right then. For this show, it would have all of a sudden settled a bunch of things for me. You would have realized, okay, some of the next gen, the crew, they're still in service on Starfleet. They're important parts of the Federation, even if Picard decided, screw it, I'm leaving. Number two, you would have realized that Picard just went to the one person who was in such a position to help him, and it would have had echoes of all good things. It's just Picard's in a different, not Picard, but Riker's in a different place. So instead of being distanced from everyone, it would have been awesome. And when that didn't happen, I was like going, his house has got shields and it can scan for cloaks. Okay, well, he's going to protect his family. He's not active Starfleet. Okay. And then I had to kind of settle into this is, Star Trek fan fiction written by people who love Star Wars again. That's kind of, I just found myself in that same boat. I wasn't in a starship. I'm just in that same boat. So, but I swear for half a second, I was like, oh, it's a starship. They're on a holodeck. That would be so cool. And then it didn't happen.
I think that would have been awesome. I really love that idea. It's a huge missed opportunity there. We do have another comment on the chat here. Says Bobby Chambers, if only the fans of the show had a hand in the writing. It's almost like everyone has tried to change their style of writing. Everything has to be dark and shocking to be good. Thanks, Game of Thrones. Bobby, I actually really, the funny thing is I really liked Game of Thrones, and I'm one of those people that really got pissed off at the last season. Although I saw the decline. Decline starts to happen probably around the 5th season, actually, in Game of Thrones. But they actually were running on fumes and actually came up with some decent ideas until the last season, which was just completely awful. So I do kind of also the a lot of people have already been kind of noticing the whole incest vibe between the Zot Vosh agents, between Soji's boyfriend and his sister, and that's totally a Game of Thrones thing. Like I'm just like, they're even calling her Cersei Romulan. People are calling her Cersei Romulan, that character.
Right.
Katie also had a comment, says, I think she was reacting to our excitement and stuff. She said, totally, yes, heck, Daj should have been Chakotay and Seven's daughter. Blending Starfleet and a girl hunted because of her nanoprobe DNA. Oh, the possibilities. I don't think that's necessarily a bad pitch, Katie. I know you being a big advocate of the Chakotay Seven relationship, which is not universally liked in Star Trek. A lot of fans don't like that relationship. I know Katie does. That could have been a real interesting storyline as well. You know what I mean? If Soji had been the daughter of Seven and Chakotay, and she was being hunted for her nanoprobes, just as Icheb was, and Icheb was murdered for his nanoprobes. I think that could have been an interesting idea too. Again, I really feel we need to do this recap once the Trek Art is over and talk about all the missed opportunities and all the things we would have done different if we had been in charge of the show. But we aren't. So all we can do is comment and kind of give you our 2 cents and what we think. But let's start at the beginning again. This one, again, does a flashback. There's a lot of flashbacks and dream sequences that start out these episodes. And in this one, we got Dave. This was like your favorite character, I think, for a while. We had the scientist from the Daystrom Institute. I never remember her name, the blonde, and we get to see why she killed Maddox. Essentially, we get to see that Commodore Sunglasses, Commodore Sunglasses comes and talks to her, and she gives. Apparently, she is Vulcan. She gives her a mind meld and gives her a vision of what Soji is capable of, apparently, as the bringer of, what is it, the bringer of death, or the death of the, I forgot what the term is that the crazy Romulan uses for her, the destroyer of worlds, right? That's what Soji and Daj apparently represent to the Zot Vosh, to the Super Tel Shiar.
Kiss. She's a destroyer. Keep going.
So the mind meld happens, and it's so intense. We don't really get to see a whole lot of images. They go by really fast. So all we can basically see is, like, it looks like people are dying and planets are exploding. And then she throws up, which I thought was like, okay, that's all right, whatever. You know what I mean? So she throws up because it's so intense and she can't take it, right? And then she swallows a probe. She actually swallows a probe that apparently is chewable probe. Okay, whatever. So she chews this probe, and that's how they're tracking them. That's how they can stay a step ahead of them. So, we kind of knew that she was like a sleeper agent. We knew that when she killed Maddox, but now we find out why she killed Maddox. She has got this vision. I'm kind of curious why she wouldn't kind of assume that maybe they're trying to trick her. You know what I mean? Like, why would she just assume that the vision is correct, especially when it's a vision and she's a scientist? And why wouldn't she question that at all? Why does she just go like, oh, okay, yeah,
Right.
That doesn't really make sense with her character, considering that she is a scientist and she is somebody who was actually actively trying to develop synths and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was weird. And Katie comes in to always help me with the names. It's Angus Girardi and Romulan Commander O. And Katie adds Commander Oh No. I like that. Commodore Oh No.
Commodore Oh No.
So anyway, that's how it starts. Then we, gosh, I can't remember. What was the next scene? Was it? Were we back with? We're not with Picard yet, are we? Or I can't even remember what the next scene was after that, because it's so jumbled. That's the problem. Like, so many different things are going on. I think they're trapped, right? They're back on the ship and they're trapped because the the artifact, the disabled Borg ship is like got them in a tractor beam, and they're trying to get away.
They're trying to get away, and the tractor beam is overloading all their systems. Meanwhile, I think inside the cube, they're trying to remember, because there's that they're
well, what's happened on the cube
mentally.
Well, the cube is confusing, because what's happened on the cube is last we saw Hugh and Elnor. Elron.
I remember that. I remember that naming.
Otherwise known as Legolas. He and Hugh were together, and you kind of assumed that he was going to, that Elnor was going to, save or protect Hugh, because
but he's gone. He's totally
gone.
Missing, and it's Hugh,
and Hugh has been captured.
Yep, and they've got some of the XBs lined up. Katie just said it.
It feels like it's like all of the XBs. That's the way it kind of came across. It was like, basically this is like it, And it's funny because we had PJ on the show last week, and we were talking about Hugh and what we thought might happen to Hugh, or And I remember one of the things PJ said was that hey, maybe all those former Borg, the XBs, they would help. They would help Hugh if he was in trouble, right? No, not on this show.
There's like 4 of them, I guess. Like it's because I thought that too. I thought that's what was going to happen. I thought that Hugh and the XBs were going to basically stage a revolt, and they were going to end up kicking the Romulans and the Vash or whatever off of the cube, because Hugh showed us that he knew aspects and how to get to different parts of the cube that they didn't even know how to access. So I thought it was going to be one of those, he was going to turn to the camera and be like, it's okay. They don't control this cube. We control this cube. And he put his hand up on the thing, and you see the XBs doing stuff, and the cube would start transforming the different things. And you would realize that, the former Borg control that cube, not the Romulans.
That would have been so cool. That would have been so cool, man. I mean, I can't believe all the missed opportunities they have just to go out of their way to make this as dark and depressing as they possibly can. And Katie mentioned, so Narissa and Hugh killing XBs in front of Hugh. So they kill all the XBs right in front of Hugh. He does nothing. You know what I mean? He's not going to betray Picard. At least that was good. He's not going to betray Picard. But they kill all the XBs. They don't do anything, which I'm just like, okay. I think they're taking the victimization of the Borg a little too far, because we've seen repatriated Borg, including Hugh. We've seen 7 of 9. We've seen Picard. We've seen all these people. Icheb, of course, Icheb was brutally murdered in a previous episode. We've seen how these people do adjust and even thrive after their time in the collective. But now they're just worthless. You know what I mean? So they're just cannon fodder. They're killed just to be shocking. They're killed right in front of Hugh to get him to reveal where Picard has gone. And then finally, Elnor shows up and tries to rescue him. But of course, our heroes can't rescue anybody. He fails miserably, and Hugh's killed anyway. Almost as an afterthought. Yeah. Almost as an afterthought to that whole sequence. Hugh's just randomly killed by basically a knife that I think Elnor dodged. I don't think it was even intended for Hugh. I think he dodged it, and it just hit him in the neck. And of course, you got this blood gushing out and everything like that. I was just like, what are these guys doing? We talked earlier about our hopes for Hugh and him possibly joining the crew and being one of the crew and all that kind of stuff. And I think I can't imagine fans that didn't have the same feelings we did. And I feel so bad about, Jonathan Del Arco has been pretty good. I've seen a lot of his Twitter and things like that, and I think he's done a really good job of sort of navigating this. He put a post out there where he said, "Hey guys, I don't write this stuff. Just so you know, I don't write this stuff. I was happy to work. I was happy to do the opportunity, but that's not my decision. It's not my decision to kill this character off. I'm sure it's not his decision, because I'm sure we'd like to do more. He seems to be really into it. I just thought
See,
that was another huge missed opportunity.
If I were writing this scene, I know Jonathan Del Arco is not watching, but if I had been writing that scene, you would have turned and grabbed that Romulan commander by the throat. You would have lifted her off her feet, and you would have said, "You don't control this cube, we do." And then he would have
That would have
said,
been
"Resistance
so
is
awesome.
futile,"
And that
and
could
use
even be
the
a little.
Borg line.
But then you even have a little bit of darkness there, but there's still hope, right? So it's like the Borg are still kind of the Borg. You know what I mean? And they
That's what I'm
they
talking about. It's like they're not helpless. They're not helpless. They're recovering, but they're like former, they're PTSD, they're former warriors. They have been assimilating worlds. They're not these helpless sheep to be slaughtered. I didn't buy that for a minute.
Look how defiant Seven of Nine was when she was deborgified. How defiant she is in those first episodes of Voyager. And Katie says, I am tired of the poor Borg storyline. I get it. Janeway got it. Picard even got it. But the Borg were evil. They purged everything from you. To victimize the collective is dumb and ridiculous. And I'll go a step beyond, because what I really hate is the original intention of the Borg as they were created was that they were supposed to be an unbeatable enemy. That was the pitch. I want to create an unbeatable enemy. And Roddenberry didn't create the Borg. It was one of the other producers who's actually very controversial who created the Borg. And that was his intention. His intention was an unbeatable foe. And I feel the Borg have been beaten up so bad from their original intention that they're becoming like unrecognizable. And Katie mentions, yes, where the heck is the resistance is futile? Gosh, this show. That would have been cool too. If Hugh, then you can have a little bit of darkness mixed with the hope. If Hugh suddenly said something like that, resistance is futile to the Zot Vash, you know what I mean? Like, you think, again, like you were saying, like, you think you're in control? You think you're in control of this cube? No, you're not. You know what I mean? It doesn't work that way. Oh, man. Again, just a huge missed opportunity. Huge missed opportunity. So, of course, so now we have one storyline stuck on the cube with Elnor, which doesn't really go anywhere other than to get Hugh killed. That really never goes anywhere. We don't get any resolution. Elnor is just kind of stuck on the cube now by himself because Hugh's dead. The XBs apparently are all dead. So he's just on the ship. So that's one storyline. That's what I'm talking about, the scatteredness, the disjointedness of the show. Then we have the crew members that are still on the ship, the ones that are trying to get away. We can see that Agnes, right? Agnes is her name. She's starting to kind of fall to pieces because of the guilt of murdering Maddox and all that kind of stuff. She's basically like, let's just... What's that?
But also, too, she knows that them trying to run is stupid because she's got that tracking thing basically in her blood.
There's no point.
So there's nowhere they can go because like going, he found us again, and she's like sitting over there going, well, yeah, I know, but I can't tell you. Yeah, I know.
She just wants to go home at this point. At this point, she's just like, I've kind of done my duty. I killed Maddox. That was my role to play, and now I just want to go home. And so she's all falling to pieces and everything. Again, the disjointed nature and the tone problems. They have that scene where Raffi's like giving her cake and giving her chocolate milk, like she's 4 years old, and I'm your Aunt Raffi now. You know what I mean? Like my drug addicted Aunt Raffi. Yeah, okay, yeah. As she's on the vape pen and everything like that, as she's comforting her, and then of course we get another gratuitous throw up scene, and that one was gratuitous. Like she just hurls very graphically on the screen because, she's going through all this guilt and all this angst and everything. So what ends up happening there is she tries to kill herself. That's the end of that storyline. She tries to kill herself. She's in a coma. I hope she doesn't recover. That's just me, because she deserves to die. But they'll bring her back because, why not? She's funny. Well, she's quirky,
But see, she's one of the new crew members, so they'll save her. Everybody else from the old cast is apparently expendable, but somehow she'll live because, she's one of the new people.
I like this. Katie says, there's no such thing on planet Raffi. I remember that little line, that little cringe line. Yeah. So anyway, that's the end of that storyline. So we've got those two storylines. That's all that happens. Elnor just isn't effective. Hugh's dead. The other one, the girl tries to kill herself. So the main thing that everybody wants is Riker, Troy, Picard, and Soji and all that kind of stuff. And right off the bat, I had some problems with the way that they did that whole storyline. I feel it was very forced into the rest of the narrative of the show. There's tons of evidence that says that's exactly what happened. Jonathan Frakes actually said when he was directing episodes 4 and 5, at that point, he did not know that he was going to be acting in this show. If you can believe that. He said that on the Ready Room. That's why I tell people, watch the Ready Room, because they let things slip out. They think are very casual, and you're like, oh, that's like a bombshell. You know what I mean? The fact that you didn't know you were going to be in this show when you were directing it, like an episode before, 2 episodes before, and you didn't even know you were going to be on the show. They just jam that in there, and that's how it feels to me. It feels like this part of the show doesn't really fit the rest of the show, other than they still kind of treat Picard like a senile old man, and I did not like that.
So I
don't like Picard being treated like a senile old man.
So I got to bring this up. So while we're on Nepenthe, okay, of course we meet Riker and Troy's daughter. They keep calling her the wild girl of the woods, and she's sort of out having sort of this adventure, and she's got a bow and arrow, and I guess she's hunting rabbits or something like that they actually use for this pizza they make later in this particular scene. But we see that they're kind of living in the woods, and they haven't forsaken technology, but it's almost just like they have a cabin in the woods and they're kind of away from everything. It seems like most of the Enterprise crew that we've come to know and love so far, they're all just off away from everything. And then we find out that they had a child, a son, that basically had died, and that I guess somehow a positronic matrix of some kind could have been used in order to help manufacture a vaccine or a cure that could have actually saved their son's life. And then, of course, when synths and synth research and everything was banned because of the attack on Mars, they're not able to have access to these facilities or whatever, so that basically a cure could happen. This particular planet, Nepenthe, has amazing regenerative capabilities. So they came to this planet in the hopes, and I assume that maybe Riker discovered this planet while he and Troy were on board, his ship. Maybe that's how they knew about this planet. They don't say that, but in my mind, I was thinking maybe that's why they knew about it. But they come to this planet because of its amazing regenerative properties, in the hopes that it'll save their son. It doesn't work. Their son dies, and they're basically just there trying to figure out what they're going to do. And here's the thing. So Picard and Soji arrive. Picard and Soji are having issues, and there's this scene where Soji is kind of acting out, and Picard kind of takes the brunt of her anger or whatever she's dealing with. And then they start this whole conversation about parenting. And they tell Picard the reason he doesn't know how to relate to Soji is because he doesn't understand what it means to be a parent. He's never had a kid. Teenagers are the worst, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, so Inner Light. Okay, one of the greatest Next Gen episodes of all time that people just constantly go on about. I love Inner Light. It's not one of my favorites. People love Inner Light. The one with the flute. Okay, the one with the flute.
That's one of my favorite Star Trek episodes of all time, of any Star Trek. I love that episode, and I relate to that episode very well. Actually,
did he not have children in that episode? Was not the point of that?
And even a daughter, and even a daughter. Yep.
Okay. Yes. Okay. How is it that Picard doesn't understand how to relate to children at all, when basically, according to Inner Light, not only did he because he had a son, I think, and a daughter, didn't he?
Well, we need to set up the scene here too, because I think the scene that you're really talking about, and the one that really upset me, was Soji believes this might all be an illusion. Which, by the way, these guys are not following their own continuity, and I always say this: continuity is the enemy of lazy writers. Daj immediately felt safe with Picard because of her failsafe program. Soji should have the same damn failsafe program, and this shouldn't even be an issue. That's why I'm saying this was a forced narrative. It was put in there to get the legacy characters on. Katie had a comment here where she says, Shaban and Kurtzman put in Riker for a fan boost. The legacy characters are clearly shown for ratings, and that's what I think. And I think this proves it because they're not following their own continuity. Daj was very comfortable with Picard because she was programmed to be that way. Why would her sister be any different? Doesn't make any sense. And you talked about the stuff with Inner Light. There's that scene where there's actually a good scene between Soji and Troy. Soji's explaining the problem that she has, okay, which again does not consistent with what her sister did, but at least she's explaining the problem, right? Troy's being very sympathetic and listening and all that stuff. And then Picard just comes in and kind of he's just a dick. He's just a dick for no reason. He comes in and just says, yep, that's right. We're just trying to kill you. And then Soji even assaults him. She actually pushes the old man, which I'm just like, oh my God. You know what I mean? If I was Riker, I would have smacked that girl in the face. The guy's like 100 years old. You know what I mean? You're right. Not going to get away with that. Now, granted, she is a synth and she could kill all of them. And they even make that point. Right. She could easily kill them all. But still, it's like, this is too much. This is really too much. And treating Picard, literally, that's, I feel like, how he's treated on the show. He is just a pathetic old man. Push him out of the way. You know what I mean? It's like showing what the whole show is. You know, and I really hated that scene. And then Troy comes, and it's very obvious because she's on an elevated platform. They do a very specific angle. Picard's sort of cowering, and she lectures him about what a dick he is and how he doesn't know how to relate to children. And again, getting back to your thing, what the hell happened to Inner Light? One of the most beloved TNG episodes ever.
That's the thing that kills me. Because I'm like sitting here going, okay, Inner Light is one of and on many lists, it is the most popular Next Generation episode, period. For a lot of people, that is number one. That's like City on the Edge of Forever for original series. Okay, like it's up there. Everyone knows, well, not everyone, but all diehard Star Trek fans have seen Inner Light. Everyone I know, anyway, loves that episode. The flute went for a bunch of money when they did the auction. You know, it is a highly, highly celebrated episode of Next Generation. It is a very, very important episode for Picard. And I'm like going, so that didn't happen? Like, Picard, like, hey, how does Picard? I don't understand this. How do you as a writer writing that scene just forget about Inner Light? Just totally forget about it. Because that's what they had to do. They had to totally forget about Inner Light to write that scene. I was sitting on my couch and I was really seething going, are you kidding me? I'm happy to see Troy and Riker, but it's like, no one's going to bring up the fact it's like, don't you like, even if Picard doesn't understand how to relate to her because he's become a hermit and a curmudgeon or whatever, okay, you would have thought that when Troy started her thing, she could have said, I would have thought you would have remembered what you'd learned about children when you had your incident. And then she could lecture him. How about one line? That establishes the previous continuity? One line. That's it.
I know.
That's how they fix this stuff. Just throw in one friggin' line. That's it. That's all. And I've been like, oh yeah, okay, well maybe because he's been off in his vineyard and he hates people and he's just got his Romulan super spies and they're making wine. Maybe he's forgotten how to relate to not only to children, but people in general. Wow, that kind of sucks.
The other thing about this that I really hate is the implication that Picard has not been continuing his relationship with the Rikers. When he meets their daughter, she doesn't run up and say like Uncle Picard and hug him. In fact, she's kind of a dick to him. You know what I mean? She talks about this Captain Crandall, which actually some fans are interested in who Captain Crandall is. So there's a lot of name dropping of that character, enough that I even remember the name. And I never remember anybody's name. And she talks about Captain Crandall. Oh, he's even older than Picard. I mean, she's just right off the bat, she's already being condescending to him. There's no love there. You know what I mean? I did like that Troy the first thing she does is hug Picard. I mean, that was nice. I mean, that was good. At least that was a good reaction. It was kind of negated by the lecture later, where she's standing over the pathetic old man who's just been assaulted, by the way. He was just pushed, and she's doing this to him. I don't know. I have to say, again, we've been talking about, I think a theme here is missed opportunities. There were some really good opportunities to really make this shine. But I do think, just looking at their own continuity in the show, this clearly was just sandwiched in and didn't have anything to do with the rest of the narrative. And they just threw it in there because they knew they kind of had to. And again, that Ready Room interview, Frakes says when he was directing on set, episode 4 and 5, those are the episodes he was directing, he did not know he was going to be in this show. What does that tell you? They just threw it in there. That wasn't part of the plan. The plan, in fact, and in that same interview, Brent Spiner, he talks about that Patrick Stewart actually had a dinner with all his old castmates and told them none of you were on the show. And that included Brent Spiner, who did come on the show. And I'm just like, What a dick move. You know what I mean? Like, that's just like, what? It wasn't like, hey, I'm fighting for you guys. Don't worry, we're gonna get you in here at some point. We're hoping for additional seasons. Don't worry, we'll get to you eventually. No, he told them none of you are going to be on the show. And it was apparently a lie, because Brent Spiner then got a call, he said, from Kurtzman and Akiva, and they offered him a part on the show. It's just amazing what's going on behind. I would just love to know what's really going on behind the scenes with this stuff. I would love to be somewhere, even if it was just as a grip, just as a fly on the wall, just listening to all that stuff, because I think it's just a big mess.
Here's the thing that kills me. Okay, if they had no intention of putting this, Little House on Nepenthe scene, into it, why couldn't you just pull back and reveal that they're on a holodeck on a ship? Like, why can't you at least, if you're going to give us fan service, can you like put it on a plate with some garnish and make it look pretty? And I want
to point this out. I have an article, we may get to it during the news segment. Excuse me. Where Shaban talks about how, because this narrative has been coming from the production team like crazy, and they're like, we're only going to use the characters, the legacy characters, if they really fit the narrative, if they're really important. What did Troy and Riker actually do in this episode besides massive fan service? How did they really contribute to the story in any real shape or form? This is just like a little side quest. That's all it is. They had to invent this whole thing with like Soji being distrustful of Picard, even though her that shouldn't be because of the programming. And we saw that her sister wasn't, you know what I mean? But we kind of invented this whole thing, invented a problem so we could get them on the show. And I'm just like, just be honest that this was just complete and total fan service. Hey, I'm happy it wasn't a cameo. I'm happy that there was some substance in what they were talking about in terms of some actual real interaction. We don't just see them for one scene and they're gone. But I think the producers are so disingenuous about what they're doing. It infuriates me. It really does, because there's a lot of fans that believe them, and I don't know why, but they do. And then they're going to come and troll you like on the internet because you're pointing out these things. You know what I mean? And it just infuriates me.
So continuing our writer's room, let me just go ahead. Let me explain. I'm going to jump to my wannabe ending of this episode if I were writing it. Okay. So if I were writing this, okay, they would actually need to get on a ship in order to rendezvous with Rios. Okay. And they would go to this spaceport where this captain, whatever, that Riker clearly doesn't like, shows up every once in a while. The ship shows up. The doors open. Picard and Soji are going across the little plank or the little air dock or whatever. They get there. The other doors open. The guy turns around and says, "I hear you need a ride," and it's Q. That's
cool.
how I would have ended this episode. Now, they're not going to go anywhere near that, but I mean, if we're going to do fan service, cool. Can we at least do it right? Because then you could have got Picard's reaction. It's like, oh no. But if Picard needs help, who better to basically help him out than Q? That would have like I tell you, this show could be so awesome. And here's the thing that gets me. It's like they want it to be Logan, but they don't understand what Logan did well. Like they don't get it. They don't understand what made Logan so great. They've got the downbeat going, but there's no upswing. There's no awesome scene. There's no, oh, that's amazing. For example, in Logan, spoiler alert, when Professor X dies in Logan, he's killed by a clone of Wolverine. Was it the X-24 or whatever? Like, that's amazing. That's an awesome, shocking scene.
I've never seen Logan, by the way, so thanks for that.
Sorry. Sorry. All right, sorry. But the point being is that at least that death is like, oh, and it's amazing and it's shocking and it leads to a fight, like a really amazing fight. And it's like, oh, so if you're going to give us the death of great characters like Hugh, and all these other things, it's like, if you've got to do it, if you're going to do the downbeat, at least do it with class. Like if Hugh had died fighting against the Romulans.
I think it's very telling that the one character that I'm seeing, like, universally people are like, what a Trek moment with Hugh, with the Borg Reclamation Project, all that kind of stuff. Almost universally, everybody liked that. Even people that don't like the show are like, that was great. That's Trek. And what do? We kill him in like the second scene of the next episode, immediately. As an afterthought.
Yeah. And in my version, Hugh lives, the Borg uprise, and he does use the line.
Oh, I love your version.
Futile. And in the next episode, we watch the Borg evict the Romulans. Forcibly evict the Romulans.
Love your version. We're a little backed up on comments. Katie had some great comments. And this one from earlier, because I didn't catch this. Katie, you have a great eye for detail. When we were talking about Agnes, she said she purposely took the potion to spit up the tracker. When that happened, the next scene showed Narek losing the signal. And I didn't notice that. And that does make sense. Well, I think that's part of the reason that she's killing herself also is the idea is that we don't know exactly how that pill worked. I remember that she specifically had to chew it, which I thought was interesting, instead of just swallow it. You would think she would just swallow it. And they said she had to chew it, which to me would kind of imply that it kind of like gets absorbed into her body and she couldn't just throw it up. But as she died, that might have an effect on it. So I don't know. But I didn't catch the fact that Narek's tracker lost the signal. I didn't catch that. So if that's the case, it makes sense. I didn't catch that. And then she also said, Shaban answered on IG about the C7 relationship, which is Chakotay and 7, and Janeway. And he said, and he's quoting the IG article, that was a long time ago, and then Janeway didn't have good character growth in 7 years. Boo. He said, Spot the Cat was a long time ago. The way they're treating the previous episodes, the previous incarnations, is bad. We actually talked in a previous episode. We talked a little bit about why does it seem so much of the modern legacy media, when you're talking about Star Wars, Star Trek, I think any franchise right now where they're rebooting or remaking, they always have to act like the newest incarnation is the best. And Next Generation never did that. Next Generation never tried to be the best Trek. It tried to be Trek. It tried to be its own Trek and also be respectful to the original Trek. And there was never this blatant thing on the show where they're like, oh yeah, we're way better than Kirk. You know what I mean? We're way better than, and there wasn't anything from the producers that ever said that. Gene didn't go around saying, well, Next Gen's much better than the original series or anything like that. That was not a thing, Now, anytime something new comes out, it always seems like you have to say, well, this new version and our new characters are better than the old characters. And I'm sick of that. Because these people are literally standing on the shoulders, of giants. And they are getting attention, they're getting money, they're getting all this stuff because they're using the name, deliberately using the name. And then they're even going to go so far to say, yeah, our stuff is better. It's like the thing with Kurtzman where he said that those warrior nuns, were the best fighters in the universe. The best fighters in the universe, okay? That's the kind of attitude that these people have, and I have a real problem with it. And I don't understand fans that are okay with it either. It's like, it's okay to be excited. If you like the show, that's okay. It's okay to disagree about a show, and if you really like it, that's fine. But don't come to me and tell me the original Trek sucked or Next Generation sucked. Meanwhile, some of these people, they'll be sitting there talking about, well, Next Gen wasn't that great, blah blah blah, and then the next post will be like, oh, wasn't that so cool seeing Riker and Troy and Picard together? It's like no matter what is spewed to them, they just regurgitate it, you know?
All I could think of is that when they originally did Next Gen, the idea with Riker's character is that Riker's character was going to be the Kirk kind of character, you know, and we were going to see him kind of growing and developing and eventually growing into command. But that was the point of Riker's character, that he was he was going to be the Jim Kirk type of character on the show. And all I could think of is how different, you know, because of the writers of Picard, how completely different this version of Riker is. Because when they were relaying the whole story about what happened with their son, all I could hear is what Kirk's response would be. The answer is no. I am therefore going anyway. So
Yeah.
it kind of shows you how far they've gotten from what the original vision for these characters are. And that's not a problem necessarily, as long as they're in a good show and they still kind of show respect for what's come before. But it seems to me they're disregarding a lot of things, just an awful lot of stuff. And I tell you right now,
they're trying to reinvent the franchise, and that's very clear. They are not trying to. They're trying to use what came before to sell their product, okay, but without any of the respect for that original product, because they're trying to remake everything. They're just trying to make it in their own image, in their own depressed, depraved, mentally ill, you know, kind of world that they live in, and just force it on everybody else using the brand.
But let me point something out though. But here's the sad thing about it. They are using the legacy of Next Gen to sell a new product. But when I look at this show is missing all the trappings of the fun things that people like to have. You know, there's no really awesome new uniforms. We hardly see them. There's no new comm badges. I haven't seen any new phasers of any kind. There's no new starships. We've got the one ship that they're flying around on, the La Sienna. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But it's like, there's just not all that fun. Like, for example, sitting right here. Okay, here's a product. They sold me on this. Here's Kirk. Okay, I've got a con. I've got a bunch of stuff. You know, here's a fun Star Trek thing that I bought. You know, I love this uniform, you know. But the thing that kills me about this show is if they're using this legacy of Next Gen to sell something, what are they selling? I don't know what they're selling, because they're not selling fun new uniforms. They're not selling fun new props. They're not selling fun new starships. They're not. I don't know what they're selling.
So it's been widely reported that the licensees are not happy with this show at all. In fact, that's why they say a lot of the reworking was done, because the licensees just were like, we can't sell any of this stuff. You know what I mean? We can't sell any of this stuff. There's a funny scene in the Ready Room where Will Wheaton is interviewing the actor who plays Elnor, and Will Wheaton, you know, being how he is, he's all like, "Hey, you realize you're going to be an action figure?" And I wanted to say, like, no, he's not.
No, he's not.
No, he's not. You are so deluded, man. You are so deluded. He's not going to be no action figure. You know, maybe like for like a real custom, you know, like basically a custom kind of thing. Yeah, see, there we go. There's an action figure, right? No, and there's, I don't know. I just, it boggles my mind what they're doing. I don't know. I don't know. Just aghast. I'm kind of like almost speechless. Star Trek Picard Prison Break. And Katie, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. It's just like, I think this just could have been done a lot better. And I think this the best part of the episode, I think, was very obviously forced into the narrative, and it just doesn't really fit. It's like a puzzle piece that just kind of jammed in there. You know what I mean? To get it to fit. You know, and then meanwhile, like I said, it's just so dark and depressing. Agnes, that's her name, right? The scientist girl. She was like the comedy relief of the first couple episodes, and now she's like committing suicide. You know what I mean? Like, come on, guys. Who are you guys, like, that mentally ill? This is the way you write. You know what I mean? Because that's what that is. That's literally mental illness. So it's like, what are you guys doing? What are you trying to accomplish here? Except to make your audience go crazy along with you because you're crazy. So I don't know. It's. I will say this. At least in the preview, did you see the preview for next week's episode at the end?
I did see the preview. I'm excited for the preview because I'm about ready to watch someone kick some butt. I am about ready to see, like, after what happened to Hugh, I want to see someone pay these Romulans back like there's no end in sight. And so I'm very excited.
And actually rescue somebody. And actually rescue somebody.
Nice?
Wouldn't it be nice to actually see one of our heroes rescue somebody? Which it does look like we're going to see that Seven's going to return and she's going to save Elnor because he got left behind, which is also messed up. Why did they leave him behind? I still don't understand why they didn't just go through the portal with Picard and Soji. I still don't understand that. The writing in here is bad. I mean, it's bad, and it doesn't make any sense that they wouldn't just go with them, especially with what happened. But I will say, with the preview coming up, it looks like we will have the return of Seven, and at least it looks like she's going to save Elnor. Now, that could go completely haywire with this show. Who knows? But that's what it looks like. And if that's what happens, well, that's good. At least we have a legacy character doing something and saving another character.
So, I just want to point out, for those of you watching right now, if I had written this episode, the next episode, you would have been treated to a scene of Elnor, Hugh, and the XBs, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 style, taking back the Borg cube.
Yeah. And Katie, she actually has recently watched the Dark Crystal Rise of the Resistance. I saw her talking about that on Twitter. And she said, Eric, I know you saw Dark Crystal on Netflix. We actually did review Dark Crystal Rise of the Resistance on a previous episode. Are those episodes available on Anchor now? That one in particular?
Yes, Dave? Yes, it is on Anchor. Yes.
So we do have a review that's available on Anchor, basically an audio-only version. But she says, check out Crystal Calls. The producer of the series makes a great comment how honoring the traditions of the past and how that makes it work. And I totally agree with you, because if anybody who has watched The Dark Crystal, the original film, and then watches Rise of the Resistance, they are honoring that legacy to a T, almost. And the thing is, apparently, as I understand it from that documentary, Netflix made that call and decided, because they were actually pitching like a CG animated version. And Netflix said, you know what? Can we just bring the puppets back? Can we just do the puppets? Because that's what we all love. Let's do the puppets. Right. We've got tons of money. Right. We've got tons of freaking money. We're burning through it. We're going into debt. Let's just do the puppets. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a cool thing about Netflix, that Netflix has the money to do that, because they are throwing so much money at their content, at creating content. But yeah, Age of Resistance is done so much better. And I think of the characters, like the characters that return, like, for instance, like the Chamberlain. My daughter loves the Chamberlain now. The Chamberlain is just like such an interesting character to her because he's so wormy and just like, and it's the same character as in Dark Crystal. They didn't change him at all. And they made a much bigger, more expansive story, much bigger scale. There's like battles in Age of Resistance. There's all sorts of stuff. It's like, it really is like, hey, we're expanding this. We're making it more. And I feel like Picard is contracting it. It's getting small and smaller and smaller. You know what I mean? Because it's an in-depth character study, and it's an in-depth character study on mental illness is what it is to me. That's how I feel right now.
I don't know who it is an in-depth character study of, because it's like, unfortunately for Picard, it's one note. He gave up, he went to the vineyard, and now he's trying to reclaim, but he can't. And that's it. There's your in-depth. I tried. Darn it. Oops. Didn't work out. I'm trying again. Darn it. Oops. It's not working out. There's your whole synopsis right there. Oops. It didn't work out. I tried again. Oops, it's not working out again. Oh well. Guess it's time to go back to the vineyard again.
I'm kind of curious what Clyde is talking about here. He says green goo is due. Clyde, if you want to give some clarification on that, I would be curious to know what you're talking about. I really am.
Yeah, I'm
Bobby
a little lost there.
Says I'm still stuck on the idea of a Raffi figure equipped with a pipe and a pill bottle.
Well,
with real drug using action. Like, move a little arm, like.
Yeah. Well, if they do make a Raffi figure, Eric, we could have a special 4th of July episode where we blow it up with some fireworks. Maybe we'll strap a couple bottle rockets to it, send it up into the sky, and there you go.
Well, we do try to end on a positive note and try to give something to our viewers. So, Katie, I know she's a huge Seven fan. Voyager's her favorite Trek. Says Seven, the She-Wolf, right? That's the Rangers, the Fenris Rangers. Seven, the She-Wolf hugs Elnor. Good moment. However, I predict Seven will be the martyr, giving her life to the name of humanity. She will activate the Queen Cell, masking her life signs as a Borg queen. That's quite a prediction, actually. There's a lot there. There was a thing where he was talking about the Queen Cell, and that if he could get there and sort of activate the defenses, it sounded like, and all that kind of stuff, that he could obviously turn the tables. So will Seven do that? And in doing so, will she lose her life? We'll have to see. It would be kind of neat if she did do that, if she did activate the Queen Cell, as it were, and activated the cube and turned the tables on the Romulans. But I'm not holding my breath for it.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. Well, and here's the thing, okay? They don't have a lot more episodes to change my opinion, but I'm going to tell you right now, so far I like Star Trek Discovery better.
Whew.
There you go. I like Discovery better. I like Discovery better.
Wow.
Discovery is at least more fun.
That's a bombshell.
I'm sorry. I really liked Pike in the second season. I had a lot of fun with that. There's all these really fun callbacks to original series episodes. I enjoyed the design of the new Enterprise.
And you're all stoked about the destruction of the Federation and all that kind of stuff. That's awesome, huh? Woo.
No.
That Picard is setting us up for. Obviously, Soji is going to be the destroyer of worlds. He's going to destroy the Federation. That's why the Federation's destroyed in Discovery. I mean, come on. You guys can't see that coming? I mean, come on.
I know it's where it's going. All I'm saying is, like, if I have to take this first season of Picard and put it up against Discovery season 2, I prefer Discovery season 2.
Wow.
I'm not in, I'm looking forward to season 3, and I have this weird feeling like at least season 3 is going to be more hopeful, because at least they're going to be trying to put the Federation back together in some form.
Well, my question is why? We see in Picard that the Federation is corrupt, that the Starfleet has turned their back. They're no longer Starfleet, to quote Picard. Why? Why bring the Federation back?
Well, here's one of the fun things about Discovery. Okay. Discovery season 1. Okay, if anyone hasn't seen Star Trek Discovery seasons 1 and 2, I'm about to go into some spoilers. Okay, so be warned.
You're just spoiling everything tonight, aren't you, man?
That's me. That's me. I'm trying to make Trek great again. Give me a break. All right, so here's the deal. In Star Trek Discovery season 1, okay, it turns out that their captain, who they're following, turns out that he's not a very good guy. He's actually a very evil guy, and they get betrayed, and it doesn't go very well for them. Okay, they do kind of end up winning the day, but at the same point, kind of their faith and command structure and Federation and Starfleet is shaken a little bit, because how did this guy wind up in command of this ship? Look at all these awful things that happen. Season 2 starts off with Pike coming on board the Discovery, taking command and telling everyone, I am not Lorca. I am not Lorca. And all of the season 2, he's constantly reminding people what Starfleet stands for and what their responsibilities and what they should strive for as a Starfleet officer. Pike, in a lot of ways, in season 2 idealizes a lot of the higher ideals of Trek. And he's constantly reminding people of what Starfleet stands for. And that's one of the things I loved about Pike. That's one of the things that kind of won me over to his side. And then by the end of season 2, that's kind of the overall narrative is, we are Starfleet. We can be better than this. We're going to come together. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, it's like I prefer seeing them start off in a dark place and end on a hopeful note, like they did in Discovery, as opposed to where we're going. I mean, I guess they might end on a hopeful note. I don't know where they're going with this show. So there you go. I'm just telling you right now, if I had to pick to rewatch some episodes of Picard season 1 or Discovery season 2, I'll watch Discovery season 2. I've actually rewatched quite a few of those episodes off and on. So there's where I'm feeling right now. Producers of Picard, you've got a couple episodes left. Let's see what you got. But right now, I think I like Discovery better.
I have another comment. Dan Stevens. He says, we must rebuild it better than it was before. Keep the good. Fix what was broken. That's how you reach for utopia, right? Well, Dan, I think that's actually not a bad point. I mean, I do think it would be nice to make it better, but I also think better is also somewhat of a subjective term. So I don't think it necessarily has to be better. I would like it to be as good right now is what I would like. I don't necessarily need it to be better. I would like it to be as, you know what I would really like? I would like it to be enjoyable for me. That's what I would like. That's all I really want. I just want it to be something that I can sit down and enjoy. A lot of people talk about this. Patrick Stewart talked about this, and this really gets to me. I have a background in public safety. I was in public safety for 20 years. Patrick Stewart talked about a story of one of the reasons he decided to do Picard again was because a detective in Las Vegas reached out to him with like a fan letter and talked about, in my profession, I see some really, really bad things. I see some really terrible things. And what I love is being able to go home, put on an episode of Next Generation, and know everything's going to be okay. That our future is bright, our future is good, and that really resonates with me. And Patrick Stewart said that really touched me. What is he doing in this show? Because you know what, that detective, I would love to know who that detective is and reach out to him because I don't think he's watching this show. And if he is, I don't think he's getting the same reaction. I really don't. I really don't. Because it's not something you're going to want. After a long shift, I would not want to watch Star Trek Picard. After a long shift, being on the street and all that kind of stuff, I would not want to watch Star Trek Picard. Katie says, she hasn't really seen Disco, being truthful. I'm not a huge radical woke person. However, Pike is a captain. And she said, hit it.
Yeah, hit it. That's right. I see, that's the thing. For me, that's the thing. I mean, I really loved Anson Mount as Pike. He had some really great scenes where he talked about what Starfleet represents. The first time he comes on board the Discovery, they actually pull up his personnel file, and he's very candid and open. And there's just something, and I enjoyed watching Discovery just to see what Pike was doing. That's how much I loved his portrayal of Pike.
Well, I like Anson Mount. I used to watch Hell on Wheels. Did you ever watch
Hell on Wheels? Is a great show. It was a great show.
So I think Anson Mount is a great actor. But I saw the first episode of the second season because that was available on YouTube for free. And I just really didn't like it. I didn't necessarily dislike Anson Mount. I will say one thing that irritates me is how many Spocks do we need? How many Spocks do we want? I mean, we're on like our fourth Spock now, technically, because there was also a kid Spock, And I get to the point where I'm like, why wouldn't, if you want to do that, why not do, here's my little pitch for you. If you wanted to do that, the way I would have done it is don't have Spock. Have the Enterprise before Spock was even on the ship. And let's go with number 1 and Pike because we never saw much of them. You know what I mean? And let's do a show where they're heavily involved. We don't need to bring Spock back. But of course they had to because Michael Burnham is Spock's sister. You know what I mean? And stuff like that, which is, to me, that's one of the things that gets fans infuriated. Is like, that's ridiculous to begin with. You know what I mean? you've already lost me, you know. But my thing is, you could have focused on the Enterprise even before Spock with Pike, and that could have been interesting to me as a fan. You know what I mean? I don't really need another version of Spock because Nimoy is always going to be the best to me. I'm never really going to get over that. You know, I kind of accepted Quinto because of Nimoy's blessing, because Nimoy was actually involved with the JJ Trek, with the Kelvinverse. So I was able, there was a sort of passing of the torch literally going on. But like, how many Spocks do you want? How many Spocks do we need? You know, at some point it gets ridiculous. I mean, right now we've got a movie version Spock and we've got a TV version Spock, and then we got a kid Spock. And it's like, how many Spocks do you want? You know, that's my thing.
Well, here's the thing that I, again, for me, if they do an Enterprise, they do a Pike show, I'm very excited about Rebecca Romaine as number one. I really liked her as number one. I like Anson Mount as Pike, and I love that redesign of the Enterprise. Like I would like to see that. I feel like it's like, okay,
you're not alone. And there's a lot of buzz saying that is going to happen. There's a lot of buzz saying they are finally kind of getting that, and they are going to probably do something like that.
We need a classic, old school, fun space adventure Star Trek show. You've given us all this other stuff. Just give us just a straight up, fun, old school space adventure show.
But I have to seriously ask you, do you really think it's going to turn out the way you're thinking? The way you're hoping, if they did a Pike show, do you really think it's going to turn out that way? Or it's going to be Pike is a drug addict and you know, number one is like a sex addict, and you know what I mean? And Spock Spock is mentally ill, right? Spock is mentally ill in the Discovery version, right? He was in a straitjacket and all that kind of stuff.
That way, yeah, because
so that's my point. Is it really going to be the way you're thinking? That's my question. You know what I mean? I don't think so. I really don't think so.
Here's what you forget. Okay, you and I are working on this thing that we can't talk about yet. Okay, but when that thing comes out, okay, they're gonna see it and they're gonna be like, you know what? These guys would be perfect for our Pike show. They understand how to do fun space adventure. We need to get them. We are going to be the showrunners of this Pike show, and it's going to kick ass.
All right.
Well, I'm in Fantasyland. Why not?
I'll take a swing at it. I can't do worse. There's no way I could do worse. I just don't feel like I could. I say that boldly and confidently. I don't think I could do any worse.
There's so many.
I do film producing with much less resources than these people do. Okay. And it's not, I'm not saying it's the same quality. It's impossible with those kinds of numbers and things like that. But man, with all that talent and all the people that I could bring to the table for something like that, I think I could do a much better job. I'll just say it, you know.
You know who I think would be someone amazing to bring on into a Star Trek writer's room is the guy that wrote Galaxy Quest. He gets it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's people there who could do this. I mean, it's not that difficult.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what part Katie was reacting to, but she said that's so true. And she said, "Can we have a baby Seven, a child Janeway, no, an old Quark?"
Why not? Why not?
That would be kind of nice. Let's have baby Seven. Like we actually gave some pretty good reviews of The Mandalorian. You know what I mean? I love Baby Yoda. I'm a big Baby Yoda fan. Maybe that's what Trek needs right now. Let's have a baby Seven or something like that. Old Quark, you know, that I kind of like that too.
he could be like Quill. I have spoken. I have gambled.
Dan Stevens says that hopefulness was my favorite part of TNG. The characters reached for a better universe. I only ever watched the OG and TNG with my dad and Janeway in college. TNG was my favorite, and I was looking forward to watching Picard with my dad again. The fun, hopefulness is why he and I enjoyed the Orville. And by the way, Dan, I've talked about before, I feel like there's this isn't your dad's Trek vibe that comes from New Trek, and that's what I call it, New Trek. A lot of people call it New Trek. That's with an NU Trek, New Trek. And I feel like there's this very powerful vibe of this isn't your father's Trek. And I grew up watching Trek with my father. My father's the one who got me into Star Trek. We watched the original series, and then when the Next Generation came out, we watched it first run together. And so it's like, I think my dad, if he watched this stuff, would just be like, this is garbage. You know what I mean? This is just complete, utter garbage. And that's what they're going for. But for me, that doesn't help my Trek experience. My Trek experience began with my dad. I would want him to like it. So yeah, I get that vibe too, Dan.
Let me throw this out there too.
And he liked Katie's idea also.
Yeah. My wife sent me a little it was a little meme, something about it's Baby Yoda and he's holding like a gun, and it says I hope the coronavirus turns everyone into zombies so I can use my skills. So see, I grew up watching Star Trek with my mom. My mom loves Star Trek. She still loves Star Trek. And my connection to Star Trek goes so deep. I've had a professional career as an illustrator and a graphic designer, and that came from being inspired watching my mom paint Spock while we watched Star Trek together when I was a child. Like my whole career, like how much I love art and all this stuff, it comes from that moment, because watching my mom paint and create art while we were watching Star Trek is what inspired me to want to draw in the first place. So I have a very deep and important connection to Trek. And I know my mom loves Star Trek. So for me, it's like, it's not my mom's Star Trek. I mean, it's like, I don't know who, I know there's people that like Picard. Okay. And there are things that I've enjoyed about some of the episodes I've seen, but on a whole, I don't know how inspired I'm going to be to watch season 2 if there is a season 2. I know they've already greenlit it or whatever. By the time that we get to the end of this, they've got to give me one heck of a pitch to bring me on for season 2. I enjoyed the twist and Discovery, and I was curious to see what they were going to do with season 2. And then when they released that trailer with Pike, I was like going, how in the world are they going to do that? That makes no friggin' sense. So I watched season 2 sort of like going, there's no way this is going to work. And then I just fell in love with Pike and number 1, the redesign of the Enterprise, and the hopeful idea that Pike represents, because that's classic Trek. That's why I like season 2. At the end of the day, Pike's message is there, and it's classic Trek. And that's what I liked about that. But this show's got to somehow pull it out of the flames, because right now, I don't know. I don't know about renewing CBS All Access after this. I don't know. I didn't care for a lot of the short Trek stuff. I mean, I kind of want to watch season 3, but I'm going to tell you right now, if Picard ends on a super mega down note, I might just be like, eh.
At this point, the only new Trek I'm really hoping will be kind of fun is Lower Decks, because I know that is going to be a comedic take on the Trek world. I saw their panel at Star Trek Vegas, and they mentioned the main showrunner mentioned that he made his writers, a lot of them who were not Trek people, he made them watch the Star Trek Next Generation episode Lower Decks. So
yeah, it's a great episode,
which I thought was kind of neat. It's a great episode. And I just like the whole idea of this B team, like the whole specialty of their specialty is second contact. Because, there has to be someone that does that. So their specialty is second. And I thought that's funny. That made me laugh immediately, So I would like to laugh. I would like to have some fun with Trek again, and not just be depressed and seeing people, drug addicted and seeing people kill themselves and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there were people that watch Trek to deal with depression because it helps them get away. If you have depression, don't watch this show. I'm telling you right now, do not watch this show because it's going to send you right over the edge. You're going to go right off the cliff. When you watch this.
Okay, I'm going to call out Micah's comment because there you go.
Love is
I hate
blind.
to say this. If
we're watching Picard, when can we use that time to watch Love is Blind? I don't know Love is Blind. What is Love is Blind?
Okay, so Love is Blind is this Netflix reality TV series that seems a little scripted, where they take these different people and they go into these little pod-like rooms, and it's kind of like they're getting to know each other. And then if they make a connection, the idea is they propose to one of them without actually seeing them. Then they come out of the pod, they spend some time together, and then theoretically they do or do not get married. I will tell you this. Unfortunately, Micah, you're right. Love is Blind was probably more compelling than some of these episodes of Picard.
Well,
I'm just telling you, CBS. You guys, I don't know what in the world you guys are trying to do. It's leaving me totally cold. I love the first episode with Data. There's been some fun things. I still think the first episode is the high watermark. We had that fun action scene with Dodge. I kind of like Dodge.
It kind of all goes downhill after the first scene. This entire series, after the first scene, it's just kind of like, ooh.
And there was some things about this episode that I really liked, but then there's some stuff about it that I dislike so much. I don't know. I don't know.
Katie has an interesting perspective. She's younger than us, and she did mention that she says, I actually introduced my mother to Trek when I was 18. It breaks my heart for this show to be so dark and un-Trek that she doesn't want to see it, and I don't really want her to watch it. And Katie's a young adult, so it's like that says something. And she's the one who got her mom into it because her mom wasn't a Trekkie, and she got into it, And that's I don't want my dad to watch this either. I wouldn't subject my dad to this. And my dad's is frail, and he lives in a nursing home, and he's over 80 years old. There's no way I'm going to show him this. It's going to make him. He's just going to give up on life. You know what I mean? There's no way he's going to. I try to give him something hopeful, something that he likes, something that puts a smile on his face. I don't know. I just don't understand it. I really don't. And like I said, wow, you paid more attention to it than I thought regarding Love is Blind.
I'm sorry. It is, that was more compelling television than Picard. At least I was genuinely going, I have no idea where this is going.
Well, I think we've beaten Picard to death at this point. So
yeah.
Let's. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just real quick, while people are in the Rogues gallery commenting, I do want to put this out there again. We are doing a sketch card contest for the people who commented. Everyone who's commented has been entered into a drawing to receive an original art sketch card. Again, the winner was actually Clyde of this Mighty Mouse card from actually last week. And then this week, I couldn't pick one, so I'm asking people in the Rogues Gallery commenting to help us decide. So far, we have one vote for this card of Speedy from Arrow Season 4. It's original sketch card. This is original art. This is not a print. The other two options we've got here real quick, we've got Black Adam. This is from the DC Supervillains. I know Eric thinks this should be it. However, we have no votes for this just yet. And then we have Brainiac from Superman the Legend. This is a one-of-one original art, artist proof. You can tell these are all official because they got the little holophone in the cover on the corner there. So again, I need our commenters to weigh in and vote. If you had the chance to win, because there's going to be a drawing, someone's going to win one of these cards at the end of this episode. Which one do you think would you like to win? We've got Speedy from Arrow Season 4, Black Adam from DC Supervillains, and we have Brainiac from Superman the Legend. So please, everyone, register your votes.
I want to mention also, we understand that not everybody has like a PO box. Not everybody is comfortable giving out their address, and that's okay. So don't worry about that. You can still vote. You can still say this is the card I like and things like that. You can refuse the card because you don't want to give your home address and you don't have a PO
and that's
box.
Fine.
I get that.
Fine.
So, but still feel free to vote because those are some great art pieces, and we like to know what your favorite is. You know what I mean? I think that's fun stuff. I liked what Katie said here about Star Trek Picard. She said this is an alternate timeline show, and Picard is certainly in the Nexus as Riker lives in Kirk's cabin. And there are other fans that caught that Riker lives in Kirk's cabin. A lot of people have said that actually. Bobby gave a comment on the cards. Black Adam, that's awesome, Bobby. You're speaking my language because I like the Black Adam too quite a bit. And then we got a vote here too. From Micah, Black Adam, where's my sketch card? Dan also says Black Adam's looks awesome. Got some momentum.
All right, cool.
Hey,
Okay.
for Black Adam here, okay?
All right. So as it currently stands, we have 3 votes for Black Adam, and we've got a vote for Speedy here. So so right now, unless something happens, it looks like Black Adam will be the sketch card for tonight. And again, as Eric said, you don't have to accept it if you don't want to give out your information for us to mail it to you. Quite a few packages have gone in the mail. Some people have already received their stuff. There's some stuff still in transit, and I do still have a few things still to go into the mail. I got caught up with a couple of sketch card gigs actually, but those will be going in the mail actually this week. Everything will officially be in the mail by this weekend. I apologize for the delay. It's just this whole process turned out to be a little bit more complicated than I thought. Just because I wanted to have, cards for people. There's other things in there.
Oh, show the card again, because I really like these are the cards that we're going to give out at events.
So
I thought those came out really well. I thought they came out really well.
They're in some of the packages that are going out. And there's going to be some other stuff in there too, because I never just do one thing because I don't know when to stop. Cool. All right. So are we ready to move on to pop culture? Lord, we've talked Picard to death.
Hey, Micah asked if she's eligible.
Well, I mean, it'd save me on some shipping.
She is commenting. I mean, that was the only rules we put on it. So.
That's true. It's true. Oh, and please be above the age of 18 and U.S. shipping only, although Eric's agreed to pay for the one that's going out of the country so far. So who knows? Who knows? There's some shows we give cards away like they're candy. Who knows? We'll see what happens.
It helps if you're a friend of the show. So
that's true. And we greatly appreciate everyone who comes and comments and is a part of the show. It makes it a lot more fun for us and a lot more interactive. I hope we're not going to lose too many people as we segue into the pop culture news segment here.
I will say I have some Trek stuff in my news that's even related to this episode. So if you guys want to talk a little bit, if you haven't got your full Trek fix, I do have some additional Star Trek news that I wanted to talk about.
Okay, cool. Well, if you don't mind, let me just set this up. So we're now going into our pop culture news segment. Here on the pop culture news segment, what we talk about is the fun and interesting things happening in the world of pop culture that actually caught our attention. These could be any kind of random or interesting topics that just kind of spark our interest or we think is worth bringing to your attention. So tell me, Eric, why don't you lead us off since you have something Trek-centric? Why don't you lead us off and tell us your first item for pop culture news?
All right, let me find the article here, folks. I always have several articles queued up, but then I got to find them so that I can share the right one. All right, this is very topical. So let's get right into it. This is a little bit of an older article, but Jonathan Frakes did actually retweet this fairly recently under his shameless self-promotion rant. That's his words, not mine. And this is an IGN article. I apologize, on Star Trek Picard. It says, Riker almost didn't return for Picard, and more from Jonathan Frakes. It says, the director, on reuniting with Patrick Stewart, introducing 7 of 9, and getting back into character as Will Riker after a decade away from acting. And this was updated, it says, on February 24th. I believe the original post, it looks like, was on the 21st of February. So, says Jonathan Frakes got his start as a director on Star Trek 30 years ago with the Next Generation episode, The Offspring, which, funnily enough, is funnily a word? Anyway, funnily enough, was about a daughter of Data's, just like Star Trek Picard seems to be. In the years since, the man also known as Riker became not just a clutch helmer on the various Trek shows of the Rick Berman era. Oh, I miss Rick Berman. Man, I miss Rick Berman. It's not in the article, that was me. But also a feature director who made the best TNG Star Trek movie, First Contact Man, and I do think that is the best TNG movie. Before I'm going to not pronounce it right, seguing into a long career behind the camera. Segueing into a long career behind the camera on shows like The Librarians, Castle, Leverage, The Orville, and many more. I do appreciate the fact that Jonathan Frakes directed several episodes of The Orville. Now, there's some interesting things that Frakes says in this article. He does talk a little bit, I think, about what I mentioned about from the Ready Room, where he talked about how he actually ended up being on the show because he was already going to be involved as a director. He knew that kind of quickly in the process, but he wasn't actually told he was going to appear on the show as Riker until he actually was on set, which again I think shows that they kind of threw that together, that whole little arc there. And he talks about how he was very reluctant to come back in a way because he doesn't act a lot anymore. He obviously has been focusing on his director's career more than the acting. He does make a joke. I've heard him make the joke several times that he's not even the best actor in his house because his wife is an actress and his daughter is an actress. And so he always says, I'm not even the best actor in my own house. So he kind of moved on from that. But I will say, I think he did a pretty good job as far as his actual acting in the episode. I'm not faulting him for that. But he did say something here. Well, here's one. This is something that's a point of pride for him. And I question this, okay? So it says, introducing the damaged 7 of 9. It says, while Frakes directed 3 episodes of Star Trek Voyager back in the day, they were all before Jerry Ryan joined the show as the former Borg 7 of 9. Now Ryan is on Picard. However, giving the pair the chance to finally work together on a Star Trek series, they had formerly done the series Leverage together, and of course, knew each other from the Star Trek convention circuit. In fact, Frakes got to reintroduce 7 in a terrific cliffhanger moment at the end of episode 4 as she beams in just as her ship is about to explode in classic Trek fashion. Now here's a quote. I was thrilled to be the one to introduce that character, laughs the director. I don't think Jerry ever did better. Jerry's more comfortable with this. What we call 7, as opposed to 7 of 9 from Voyager, she's more mature. She's more evolved. Again, the writing. It's all the writing. I really, really disagree with that statement. I mean, I really, really disagree with it. And again, it comes back to the thing of, why do we have to say that the new thing is always better? Why do we always have to say whatever we're doing at this moment is better? Just let the work stand on its own, and people will decide whether it's better or not. Better is a subjective term anyway. But the whole thing is like, she's more mature, she's more evolved. This woman is going like on blood feuds and things like that. How is she more evolved? How has she regained her humanity that was like the entire point of her story arc in Voyager? It seems like she's lost all that. So I do make the point that Frakes has said he's not a sci-fi fan. He said that. He's on record as saying that. If you've ever seen I think it's called The Captain's Chair. It was I think a DVD extra. It's Whoopi Goldberg interviewing Frakes, Stewart, Shatner, and Nimoy. Basically, the 2 captains, the 2 first officers, and they do this kind of roundtable discussion. And Stewart and Frakes say very plainly that they never liked science fiction. You can even see Nimoy get a little bit miffed. He's like, "Wait, you guys didn't watch our show?" That kind of a thing. He says it right there. So I always try to say this: the people that work on this stuff, especially a lot of the actors, are not really fans. And so you have to kind of take what they say with a grain of salt, because you know what? I understand the filmmaking process and how fun it can be, how rewarding it can be just to be on set, just to be working on set. Some of the crappiest movies ever made, I can almost guarantee you the cast and crew had a ball. Now, there are lots of films that suck, and it's because the cast and crew did not have a ball. But there's plenty of films and things like that where the cast and crew had a great time, had a great relationship, thought they were doing, they were basically doing like Citizen Kane, but it didn't turn out that way. So it's okay to be okay into the process, but I don't like things like she's more mature, she's more evolved. I don't even know how he feels like he's someone to say that, but because he didn't write it, he was a director, he's involved, but he didn't write that scene. It says Frakes and Ryan, the showrunner Michael Chabon, did have to work to figure out who exactly Seven is now and how she has changed and evolved since we last saw her in Voyager's final episode back in 2001. Again, I don't think she evolved. I think she devolved. And I think that's what this show is doing, is devolving. Here's the thing that really gets me. And there was another article about this, and this is a thing where I'm just like, I'm going to go after this, because I always go after this. It's a quote. This was the wait, I have to set that up. So here we go. Of course, modern Star Trek is more inclined to depict damaged, bitter, cynical characters. Those are quotes. But the Helmer thinks that just the nature of the world we're living in today, thinks it's just the nature of the world we're living in today. Things have changed since the days of Next Generation, where all the characters had to get along perfectly all the time, because nobody had conflict in real life when Next Generation was on, right? There was no Iran-Contra, there was no invasion of Panama, there was no first Gulf War. None of that stuff happened on Next Gen's watch, none of that, it was all perfect. It was all idyllic, right? So he says, this was the Roddenberry approach to there being no conflict, which made it very hard for the writers. Oh, the poor writers. Oh, it's hard to write for this show when drama is built on conflict, says Frakes. And G's adage about the future, his beautiful vision of the future, was without conflict. Our episodes were meant to be morality plays or cautionary tales. And the new Star Trek's Discovery and Picard are filled with more complicated relationships where there is doubt and suspicion and resentment and qualities that Gene discouraged us from playing and discouraged the writers from writing. That evil, evil Roddenberry. How dare he? How dare he do this thing we call Star Trek? How dare he? That's what I take from that. I had to call it out. I just had to call it out because I think I don't know why he had to drag Roddenberry into this. If he thinks Picard is the best and he thinks Picard's better than Next Gen, that he can have that opinion. He's been on both shows. He can have any opinion he wants. But don't be dragging Roddenberry through the mud. I've heard this argument so many times, and it is a lazy writer argument. And I've always said that's all you got to do. It's really simple. It's really simple. You use the aliens to show the conflict. You make the humans look good. They've got their act together. The future is bright. Humanity's doing well. You show the conflict with the aliens. It ain't that hard. It ain't that hard to write Trek.
Well, and like I've said, a lot of these things that they're highlighting is, groundbreaking or new with Picard. They've done all these things before. I don't understand where this idea that they're breaking all this amazing new ground. Conflict has been shown in every iteration of Star Trek. For example, even though they live in a more idealistic future, obviously, than Picard or Discovery, for that matter, if you look at original series, Kirk and Spock and McCoy didn't always get along. Eventually it was kind of portrayed and came across as just sort of being like them kind of having little jabs at each other. But initially, I think that was just conflict between those two characters. They were just different from each other, and sometimes
I will say,
had a hard time relating.
I will say though, the thing about Spock and McCoy was that you still knew there was love there. You still knew that these were basically like the way you fight with your brother. That's exactly the way that those guys were. They could be so biting to each other. They could talk to each other like that because they really were friends and they really did respect each other and love each other. And the Kirk, Spock, McCoy dynamic is what made that show. It's what made that show. I love Scotty. I love Sulu. I love Uhura. I love Chekhov. I love all the characters. But that dynamic, that relationship between the three of them is what made the show. It's what makes it entertaining and makes it fun. And even though McCoy and Spock are constantly belittling each other, It's like they're two brothers just fighting. Kirk's the dad, he's the one who's, it's kind of like they're supposed to be like his conscious. One's like the kind of the more obviously the more pragmatic, rational, less emotional. The other one is very emotional. And they work because Kirk is able to be a filter between the two and make decisions based on the advice of both of them. And they're very different people. They're very different people with completely different approaches to how they do everything, but they work together. They work together to solve common problems, and they are friends. Even though they fight like cats and dogs, they are friends. So I don't know. I mean, and the other thing is, when we talk about like sort of like in canon and world explanations, the fact of the matter is TOS took place before Next Gen. And that was one thing that Roddenberry was trying to say with Next Gen as well. Next Gen, it's been like 70, 80 years. People are more evolved now. You know what I mean? They're getting better. So they're going to be better people, you know what I mean, with less conflict than we had in the original series. That was part of the deal. That's what a lot of people say they love about TNG. That's why they like TNG better than the original series. So it's just weird to me when I see, because there's so many fans that seem to be okay with Picard or even like Picard. And it's like, well, what did you really like about TNG then? That's where I feel like there's a disconnect, and I don't understand it. I'm just going to say, I don't think Frakes is a fan. I don't think he's ever been a fan. You know what I mean? So he likes to work, and I don't fault him for that. I am never going to fault the man for wanting work. You know what I mean? And also, I'm not going to fault him for saying, hey, I did good work. I did good work. The only thing I'll fault him for is when he starts to say that, well, this is better than that. You know what I mean? Or he starts to say, like, the other guy was always like, hamstringing me, that kind of a thing. Because that's what I get. That's what I get through this kind of vibe, these kind of comments. I just don't think they're really necessary, and I don't think they add anything. They just create controversy and division among the fandom, and I'm sure even among some of the cast and crew. I'm sure there's some of the cast and crew that don't necessarily like going down this path. Because I don't hear Next Gen cast members talk disparagingly about Roddenberry. I don't hear them say bad stuff about him. So I don't know.
Well, like I said, I don't see what Picard is doing in terms of the drama and everything is that terribly different from things that we've seen in Trek before. I don't see the groundbreaking. To me, it just looks like, I mean, you look at, Deep Space Nine. I think Deep Space Nine has already been all over this territory, done it a lot better, and still managed to hold on to Gene's vision. Just saying.
No, I agree.
I don't see it.
I agree.
I don't see it.
We might have missed him, but Clyde did say bye. He had to take off. So he said, great show. I must depart. And he did say, live long and prosper. And Clyde, if we missed you, we're sorry, but just don't want to put your comment there, and absolutely live long and prosper.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I like a lot of things that Frakes has done as a director. Obviously, I'm a fan of his work as Riker. One of the interesting things I like to point out is that at one point he was actually getting paid to dress as Captain America and do appearance stuff back in the day. There's actually a picture of, yeah. So he
talked about that at Star Trek Vegas. He talked about that.
So I'm a fan of his work as Captain America as well. So, but I don't agree with his. I mean, obviously it's his opinion, but I don't know that what they're doing with Picard is necessary. I don't know if we have to reflect the turmoil of the world in order to.
But I think that's disingenuous too. By the way, I want to call that out because I gave you concrete examples: Iran-Contra, the invasion of Panama. You know what I mean? The first Gulf War, and there are plenty more. There's plenty more of controversial political stuff that was going on at the time TNG was going on, and they never went there. Never went there.
Well, and I thought we were going to have a really interesting discussion on this show, and we were going to examine the concept of AI and humanity. There was a paper that was authored many years ago. I was using as the underpinning for this project I wanted to do called Atlas, the Living Robot, that I ended up shelving for a million different reasons. But anyhow, there was this research paper, and what they talked about is eventually with technology, okay, that eventually we might be able to take our consciousness and essentially put it into an android body. and it would extend people's lives almost infinitum. And that eventually there may be this whole other civilization or group of people that's basically birthed. Maybe the next evolutionary step is to take human consciousness and merge it with machine. So it's not like AI is going to become aware and kill us. We're just going to evolve with AI and become something else. Not necessarily like the Borg, but just become something else, move beyond, you know. And so I thought that with Picard, with some of the things they were setting up, I thought we were going to have an interesting discussion, you know, about what that means maybe for us as, you know, people, right? Like as we become more and more merged with technology. But apparently that's not what they want to do. They want to. I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know what they're trying to do.
I think it's pretty obvious what they're trying to do. They're trying to get away from Gene's vision. And that's in the article. They don't want to do what Gene said. They don't like it. It's too hard. It's too hard to write with those kind of constraints. It's you probably relate to this, you know, being in the comic book industry and working for DC. I get sick of writers that tell me Superman is so hard to write. He's so hard to write. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? And the issue usually is because they say he's too powerful, so it's really hard to make interesting stories for him. And then they do stuff like Man of Steel where they start to go down the dark path, and I didn't like that because I think Superman represents hope. You know what I mean? That's the main thing Superman is he's hope. He's good. He saves people. He saves people. You know what I mean? He doesn't just destroy cities in a big fight and with millions of people dying. So Batman hates him and wants to kill him. Okay? That's not my Superman. That's not my Superman, you know? But they always say that. I used to hear that at Comic-Con all the time because I would go and talk to people. There was a time where I used to be invited to the Animation Writers Caucus of the Writers Guild, their party. Every year I used to go to that. So I'd be around a lot of these people. Boy, some of them are just like, I'm like, how are you working? You know what I mean? Like, how are you working? Your vision is like this small. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know. Well, along those lines, maybe we could just segue into our next news item.
Let's do that.
If you wouldn't mind sharing my screen. Ooh. So continuing the theme of killing beloved characters, since we were just talking about the latest episode of Picard, I thought this was interesting to talk about. Okay, so this is actually coming from polygon.com. This is really interesting. So many people may or may not know, but back in the day, DC Comics had a contest where basically they wanted to know if the Jason Todd, spoiler alert, the Jason Todd version of Robin should live or die. And so they had actually a contest where you could call in. I guess now you would text or, I don't know, leave a comment. But they wanted people to call in on a phone and basically register a vote. Either Jason Todd should live, Jason Todd should die. Well, for many years, there's a lot of people have known that there was some additional art produced because they were ready to pull the trigger on Jason Todd living. But of course, the people voted and Jason Todd died. I'm very sorry, everyone. I voted for Jason Todd to die. I did not like the Jason Todd version of Robin. He just seemed kind of whiny and whatever, and I didn't care for him. And so I said, let's get rid of him. Okay, now, he eventually redeemed himself with Batman the Cult, and I felt completely horrible about voting for Jason Todd to die because he literally saved Batman's bacon and Batman the Cult. If you have not read the series Batman the Cult, I cannot recommend it enough. Just beautiful, beautiful art by Bernie Wrightson. Truly powerful, amazing, awesome Batman story. Batman the Cult. Definitely check it out. But this is obviously talking about the story that ran in Batman Comics, where they basically, the fans voted and Robin needed to die. What's interesting about this article, I'm just going to kind of run through it real quick because you're going to need to just go on the internet and find it. But the most tragic moment in Batman's history almost looked like this. In 1988, Robin died. DC Comics still has the pages of the book in which he didn't. That's right, everyone. DC Comics still has the pages of the book in which he didn't die. So here's kind of a hopeful outlook for this story. This is by Susanna Polo, and again, this is on Polygon. So I'm going to read some of this real quick. The last decade has been a renaissance for Jason Todd, the second character to fill the role of Robin, the world's most famous superhero sidekick. He's appeared in movies, TV shows, and video games, while even his comic book self became the leader of his own team of anti-heroes. But it'll be quite some time before Jason manages to eclipse the story he's most famous for. Out of all the characters who have put on the Robin suit, Jason is the one who died in it. Yet, he almost lived. In 1988, DC Comics left the decision to off the character in the 4-issue storyline, A Death in the Family, up to an incredibly close running reader poll. To meet the publishing schedule, the creative team prepared for either eventually by writing and partially illustrating a comic which Jason survived the Joker's attempted murder and one in which he died. The tragic ending was the one chiseled into comics history. On the 80th anniversary, that's right, everyone, Robin is turning 80. On the 80th anniversary of Robin's first appearance, Polygon is excited to present a look at some of that unfinished issue, including high-resolution scans of rarely seen work from writer Jim Starlin, one of my favorite Batman artists, Jim Aparo, and inker Mike DiCarlo, straight from the DC Comics archives. We didn't kill the boy wonder, the readers did. So this is a really, really terribly interesting article. They have some artwork. This is from the one of the ads that they ran where they wanted you to call in. But I want to get to the most important part. I'm going to scroll down. Here it is, everyone. This is pretty cool. So we have side by side the published page in which Jason Todd died, and on the other one where apparently he was alive. He was nearly dead, but he was alive. And then we have here where Jason Todd is on the mend in the hospital. So I thought this was really interesting because I'd always heard about these, but I'd never seen some of these images, like the, he almost lived stuff, because if fans had voted the different way, Jason Todd would have survived his attack by the Joker. That would have been an interesting storyline. So I know that you're familiar with this story, Eric, because you're a comic fan like me. So I know you're familiar with Death in the Family, and of course, Jason Todd dying. But I didn't know, had you heard about this, that DC on his 80th anniversary, that they were going to release some of these images?
No, I didn't know they were going to release some images. I thought they did release some images before, because I have I think it's in my History of DC book. They talk a lot about this. Incidentally, when I was preparing for last week's episode and I was digging up my old comics, I have my Death in the Family, the graphic novel version that has all the comics together. So it's not the floppy version. It's the graphic novel version that tells the entire story. That was in my collection there. It was in that box. So I did buy this when it came out. And I remember, I feel like it was one of my History of DC books or something like that. It could have been an article I read. But I remember them talking about the experience of doing this and how much DC regretted what they did, because they got some intense backlash. And the reason is pretty simple. The reason is that Batman kind of transcends the comic in terms of popularity. Batman is more popular than the comic book is. That's a character, you know what I mean? Because of the movies, television shows, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people, when this happened, they thought they had killed Dick Grayson because they weren't reading the comic books. And the casual person, because this was covered on the news, and the casual person, the casual fan who say like the Adam West series, let's say, that's kind of something that had already been out. When they saw this, they were like appalled and disgusted. And they thought Dick Grayson had been murdered, not realizing that there was a second Robin. I don't think I even knew there was a second Robin at that time, because as I say all the time, I didn't grow up reading a lot of superhero comics. I was into G.I. Joe and Transformer comics. Those are the kind of comics that I read. So I don't think I even was aware. So I got this out of curiosity and also for collectability, read the story and all that stuff. And then, of course, I realized. One of the things I remember in that article that I read was that the problem with this whole approach and what happened was there were only like a couple thousand people, I think, that voted. There weren't that many people that voted on this. And they realized, why are we doing this? Why are we giving like such a a small group of fans the decision, it's such a profound decision that's going to affect the entire fandom. And it's kind of interesting because we talk now about things like fan interaction. We've even been talking about it on our show today. And what are the limits of fan interaction and fan decisions, if you will? Because I think in a lot of ways this was a bad one, and it was a little bit of like a PR disaster for DC. I don't know what the numbers were as far as how well these issues sold, and if they did like make quite a killing on as far as issues being sold. But I do recall the article that I read. They had a lot of like buyer's remorse where people at DC was like, we're not ever doing this again. That was a bad idea.
Well, what's interesting about it too is, well, I know the editorial team, did regret the decision to do some of this. I know that this is a very important storyline for a lot of Batman and DC Comics fans. And the most interesting thing about this story is because of this story, we actually get one of the best of the DC direct to, it's not DVD anymore, but the DC animated film Under the Red Hood. Under the Red Hood is probably one of the best the DC animated films they have ever made. And that animated film isn't available, never happens basically without Death in the Family. We have this character of the Red Hood. The Red Hood as the hero, or the kind of outlaw hero that he is today. We have that character because of this storyline. So it spawned some interesting stuff. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, since we were talking about Picard and basically the death of a beloved character that everyone's kind of rediscovered. I thought it'd be interesting when I saw this. We got Robin's 80th anniversary coming up. They're releasing a special issue to commemorate and celebrate Robin. They also have one for the Joker that's actually coming out pretty soon as well, because we've got a lot of important DC heroes and villains celebrating anniversaries. But I thought it was very interesting, and I thought it was neat that they put these high-res scans on the internet. So if you're curious about this or interested in it, it's a really cool, fun article. It's on Polygon. I'll try and link it in the show notes when I actually do the podcast, the audio podcast version of the show. But I thought this was interesting, worth talking about. So that's my lead news story for pop culture tonight.
No, it is interesting, and it does tie in with our feature topic with Picard, and how do you deal appropriately with the death of major characters and things like that, characters that people really like. And again, this is a really interesting case study because they did allow the fans to vote on this. But again, my understanding was, in terms of the fandom, you were talking about a very small percentage of Batman fans that actually participated in this vote or even knew it was going on, even knew it was happening,
Yep. And like I said, I'm guilty. I voted.
Murderer.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, there's that. Do you have anything else for pop culture news tonight?
Yeah, let me get I think I should probably I think I'm only going to do one more so then we can get on to streaming wars, since we went a little long with Picard, which was good because we had a really good the Rogues Gallery was really going for Picard. So this is a little bit of a bummer, but this is something that I think we have to address. We're going to have to do more stories like this, unfortunately. This is a Verge article from March 6th. So this isn't even like super recent. And this is an evolving story, and I think we're going to have to unfortunately cover it on the show, which is how Corona is affecting pop culture right now. And it is having an effect. Another thing is I do want to do some more video game content on the show, since we do have a Twitch. I want to try to build that audience if it's possible. If anybody knows a lot about Twitch or anything like that, or has some pointers on Twitch, please let me know, because Twitch is like our lowest viewership and all that kind of stuff, and I would like to engage that audience more. I don't know what I'm missing. But this is a video game related article. This is about the TurboGrafx 16 Mini. This says the TurboGrafx 16 Mini has been delayed after coronavirus shuts down production. We did a similar story where we talked about how this was affecting the Baby Yoda toy line, that one is being delayed as well. So for people that don't know what this is, if you're not a big video game fan, you've probably seen a lot of these mini systems that have been promoted and have been coming out. There was recently a PlayStation 1 mini that was kind of a failure. There was there's been several Genesis minis, like several of them have come out. And then the real successful ones have been the Nintendo Mini and the Super Nintendo Mini. Those two were very successful. I actually own a Super Nintendo Mini, and those are cool little systems because they're kind of like a nice little collectible. They look like a miniature version of the console and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, they don't have the ability to use cartridges. I don't know if this Grafx 16 Mini was supposed to have the ability to play the old cartridges or not, but I know that this is kind of for a lot of people, this is considered a very like underrated, kind of forgotten system. It just couldn't get any traction, but was actually people that own it and liked it quite a bit. And if you're a collector and you want like an original TurboGrafx 16, I think they're getting pretty pricey now and they're hard to find. So that's the reason why a lot of people are looking forward to the Mini, because the Mini is much more accessible, much easier to get. But unfortunately, because of Corona issues, it's been delayed. So you can see that I believe this is a picture of the Mini. It looks exactly like the original, the full-size version. It says the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, a retro revival of the classic Japanese gaming console, originally set to be released on March 19th, which is only like next week, has been delayed due to the coronavirus outbreak, Konami announced today. The miniature console, also known as the PC Engine Core Graphics Mini in Europe and PC Engine Mini in Japan, includes more than 50 games from the 16-bit era, such as Bomberman 93 and Wise 1 and 2, built into the software. Konami said in a statement that the coronavirus outbreak led to an unavoidable suspension of the manufacturing and shipping of the consoles. Konami has yet to announce a new release date. The company said it would be working on shipping the console out as soon as possible. Says the delay of the TurboGrafx Mini is not the first time the coronavirus has disrupted the gaming industry. Last week, the 2020 Gamer Developers Conference was postponed to later this year after big companies like Epic Games, Facebook, Microsoft, and Sony withdrew from the event. The virus outbreak has also impacted esports too, with the Chinese League of Legends Pro League switching to online competitions. And again, unfortunately, this is going to be happening more and more. It's going to be happening more with the convention scene. There are conventions that are being canceled and postponed as we speak. And I will reiterate as other people are going to sort of panic and I think in a lot of ways overreact or underreact, because it doesn't seem like anybody does anything in the middle anymore. So people overreact and they underreact. They don't take the problem seriously, or they do too much. We're going to try to be hopeful on this show. We've talked about the idea of maybe even doing a virtual con, but doing something like that if things get really bad. Because, hey, the one thing is about our format, you can interact with us. And even if I'm coughing up a lung, you don't have to worry about it, unless you're just worried about me. You know what I mean? Unless you're just worried about me, which would be nice. But you don't have to worry about me getting you sick, because you can still interact with me in the comfort of your own home or on your phone, however it is that you watch the show. If you're listening to the show, I can be coughing all over the place. I'm not going to get you sick. You know what I mean? That's not going to happen. So, and then Bobby mentioned, just read an article that the NBA was going to be suspending for the rest of the season due to the coronavirus. I had not heard that. That's huge news. That's breaking news, Bobby, if that's true. Wow. And so I did see a thing, of all things, just because the way my Twitter is, I saw that the UCLA athletics, their athletics department they're basically getting rid of the fans. The fans can no longer go to their sporting events for the foreseeable future. So they're still having competition, but only the coaches, staff, referees, and the actual athletes are allowed to go. So they're already saying no fans. So unfortunately, we're going to get more and more stories like this, and we'll do our best to cover some of them that we think would be interesting to you about how this might be impacting pop culture. But again, I do want to kind of leave it with a positive spin that, again, this is a safe place.
So I've got, you said this is your last one for tonight. I do have
for
a
news,
couple more. I do have a couple more I want to try and hit real quick if I can. I had quite a few for actually along the same lines. I wanted to bring this up. We do have people announcing virtual conventions. I thought it was interesting. I keep bringing up the Funko Pops because I like the silly little Funko Pops. So I thought this would be worth mentioning. But Funko has announced their first ever virtual convention. I found this on Nerdist. This is by Eric Diaz. And it basically says, let's scroll up. No one loves to look for deals via the convention circuit more than collectors of Funko Pop vinyl figures. And with the news of Emerald City Comic-Con in Washington being postponed due to the coronavirus threat, many fans who would love to scour the con floor for collectibles have been forced to alter their plans at the last minute. Well, just because ECC isn't happening this weekend, that doesn't mean that there won't be a convention. Only this time the convention will be online, as Funko has announced the first ever virtual con. We have a lot of people trying to do the first ever virtual con. There's another group saying they're doing it at the same time. Anyhow, this is an interesting article.
By the way, I'm pretty sure somebody already did it in the early days of the internet. So,
well, there used to be a website.
It just didn't work.
They
just didn't work.
I forget the name of it, but it was supposed to be a 24-hour, never-ending virtual convention on the internet. I can't remember the name of it now.
I think that was during during the .com bubble, that era. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I remember it because I know at one point we actually ran a paid ad for Bushy Tales on that site. Well, anyhow, this is over at Nerdist. You can read that if you're curious more about this. I do have a related Funko thing I want to mention real quick. I thought was fun. They announced that Funko's Wampa Pop figure kicks off a Star Wars combinable Hoth set. I was like, darn it, something else I might want to buy. So this is on comicbook.com. They've got a little preview image here. You can see the Wampa. And then we can see there's going to be some other ones, and it's going to basically, you put them together, and they actually make a little Hoth, little diorama with connecting bases. I thought this sounded really interesting. But again, this is for the celebration of 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back. I was looking at the images. I was like, okay, well, this one here, 369, that looks like Luke, obviously. Well, it might even be actually Han with a lightsaber. 370 looks like it's probably Chewbacca. 371 looks like it's the probe droid. 372, I'm not sure about. And then 373, I think, might be a snowtrooper and Vader. That would be kind of fun. So there's a little bit of Funko news there. I wanted to cover those real quick. And then I have one more. And I feel like we can't end the show without talking about this. So for those of us that are fans of genre entertainment, science fiction, and things like that, we lost for me anyway, a very, very important actor. Max von Sydow has passed away. They mentioned here, this was on Fox News, they said that he was the star of The Exorcist, Game of Thrones, and Star Wars, and that he has died at obviously the age of 90. There's all kinds of tributes and all kinds of different obituaries in entertainment news that you can go to look for. I want to just take a moment and talk about Max von Sydow is an important part of some of my favorite films of all time. He, of course, played Ming the Merciless in Flash to Gordon. The last episode, we were talking about Heath Ledger's Joker, and I talked about how his performance as Ming the Merciless might be one of the best villain performances in film. I stand by that. I love his portrayal of Ming the Merciless. But he played the aging king and the first Conan movie with Arnold. And he also played the Imperial ecologist, Dr. Kynes, in Dune. I might be getting the character's name slightly askew. But he was just one of those great actors that you could look forward. Like whenever I heard Max von Sydow was going to be in something, I would get excited. But tremendous actor, such an incredible body of work for his profession. So I just want to just take a moment and remember Max von Sydow.
Yeah, fantastic actor. I actually heard about this from a fan that was just posting like a rest in peace kind of thing. I didn't even see any of the like news articles or anything like that. And just a fantastic actor. I think he was not used well in The Force Awakens, to be honest, but that's not his fault. He still gave a great performance, and I'm sure he gave it his all. I am a fan of the Dune film, and so I like his character in that. Obviously, The Exorcist is probably going to be the thing that he's really remembered for,
Right.
because that's just like such a big, iconic film and all that. But every time Flash is on, it's on Comet quite a bit, and for anybody who doesn't know, I still use an antenna for a lot of my entertainment, and I watch Comet a lot. I actually watch Babylon 5 and Stargate on Comet a lot, but they show Flash all the time, and almost every time it's on, wherever it is, in the show, in the movie. So I'm always missing the beginning. Wherever it is, I just keep watching it. If I come across, I just did it the other day. I just kept watching it. It's a classic film. It's a beloved film by a lot of people. A true cult classic, really. You know what I mean? And in the best terms possible. But yeah, he's a fantastic actor, and one of those people that I think will be greatly missed in terms of his contribution to cinema. But he has a great body of work, and that's a nice thing about actors is you can still see them after they're gone. So.
I love his. I so love his performance as Ming, because at times it's so understated. I always go back to that scene where he's trying to appeal to Flash to bring Flash to his side, and he's like, "You're a hero," and he's like trying to get him to. And they're standing over that abyss, staring off into that weird multicolored, cloudy space thing or whatever. And he's like, "I'd much rather have you on my side." And he kicks that cup into the oblivion. He says, "Then scattered to atoms." I love that. I love that. It's so great. It's so great. So
he has a lot of great lines. He really does, and he
yep.
delivers them with such gusto and such conviction. This actually, in a way, with Flash, it ties into our second feature topic that we're going to be talking about, because I really want to talk about some of the stuff that Frank Langella was saying in that documentary for The Power of Grayskull, and I was really surprised how candid he was and how much he talked about, because I would compare those two performances, and also the caliber of actors. I think they're both in the same category as actors, and the fact that they brought so much. I would say it's this one, Frank Langella in Masters of the Universe, and then also Raul Julia in Street Fighter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those three are like these iconic, these great actors taking on, sort of in a way like a controversial movie, because none of these movies were like box office smashes. You know what I mean? But it wasn't their fault. You know what I mean? It's like it wasn't their fault. That's what they were all really good. I put them all in kind of the same category together.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk about Frank Langella because I love his performance as Skeletor. And on the last episode, I put him in the same conversation as Max von Sydow as Ming the Merciless for one of my favorite villains of all time. Were I directing an MCU movie, were I directing a Fantastic Four movie, I would sit the actor down that we had picked to play Dr. Doom, and I would say, okay, you need to watch Flash Gordon, pay particular attention to what Max von Sydow does here. This is Masters Universe. I want you to watch this. Pay particular attention to what Frank Langella does as Skeletor. I don't want you to do the same thing, but I want you to pull inspiration from these incredible performances. Somewhere in between this, I think Dr. Doom lives. Good luck.
I like it. I like it quite a bit.
God, man. That Max von Sydow is so great. He's been in so many wonderful things. So I just wanted to take a moment. I felt like there's been a lot of other passings too I wanted to touch on. We've lost some important comic creators kind of here and there, creators from the Golden Age, the publisher of EC died. It's just that, they always come in threes. They always come in threes. So, but I didn't want us to not mention Max von Sydow here on the show.
No, good call.
Okay.
Good call.
All right. So if that is good, are we good to segue over to Streaming Wars?
Yes, I'm good with Streaming Wars.
Very cool. Okay, so in the Streaming Wars segment, we talk about the interesting things that's happening in the world of the Streaming Wars, all the different streaming services that you can have access to or subscribe to, such as Disney Plus, such as Netflix, the eventual Peacock, whenever that's going to show up. There's all these amazing streaming services, Amazon Prime. Is anyone still talking about Apple Plus, Apple TV? I don't know what the heck it's called. Anyhow, this segment, we talk about interesting things that are happening in the world of the streaming wars. So tell me, Eric, what have you got on tap for tonight's streaming wars?
Well, I found something pretty obscure and I thought was pretty interesting. I've actually been trying to cover a little bit more of the smaller players, if you will. We talked about what is it, Quibi? I don't know exactly how that's supposed to be pronounced, but we did talk about that on a previous episode. Let me get my article here. Sorry about the little technical difficulties here. Here we go. So this is another platform that I hadn't heard anything about. This is a Wired article from March 3rd. And it says, a Netflix for the 99% enters the streaming wars. And I had not heard about this platform at all. I think it's kind of an interesting idea, but here's what it is. So Means TV is structured as a worker-owned cooperative. But even a post-capitalist streaming service will need to compete with subscriptions. So here's Means TV. Means TV. So let me get to where they kind of explain what this is. So Me TV, a new post-capitalist streaming service, was premiered on a windy Friday night last week. The premiere's crowd skewed young with interesting haircuts. They sipped Modelo's and clapped loudly when the MC, Jake Flores, the host of the podcast Pod Damn America, asked if there were any anarchists or communists in the room. And they sat attentively for the screening of the documentary Sarasota Half in a Dream, a woozy, surreal, found footage collage about the Florida city's considerable weird side. The event, like the service's other premieres in London, Seattle, and Detroit, was packed with supporters, many wearing T-shirts and pins to signal their support for Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. It says, but showing up to support a cause is one thing, paying for it every month is another. It says Means TV Detroit-based founders Naomi Burton and Nick Hayes first gained national attention as the producers of a low-budget and tremendously effective viral campaign video for U.S. Representative Alexandria, I'm going to butcher her name, Cortez in 2018, helping propel the freshman congressperson into progressive stardom. After that, they worked on campaigns for candidates around the country under the name Means of Production, all the while dreaming of a project they pitched as Netflix for the 99%, a platform for leftist voices by leftist voices. So what this is, it says, the idea is that we're bringing together all these disparate leftist creators, be they podcasters, be they shit posters, be they YouTube content creators, Hayes says. We see it as a project for rebuilding some sort of leftist media institutions, citing the Democratic Socialist magazine Jacobian and the anti-capitalist media nonprofit Democracy for Work, or Democracy at Work, as inspirations. Han Burton envisioned Means TV as a way to provide an alternative platform for filmmakers and audience who want their art to reflect their left-leaning politics. They hope the business model ideological tilt will help it stand apart from its many, many competitors. Its offerings are selected for their politics in addition to their value as entertainment. And the company is structured as a worker-owned cooperative. So what we have here, and I think is pretty interesting, is this is a smaller subscription-based service that has recently premiered. And their basically premise is that mainstream media isn't left of center enough. So they need something more left of center in order to have a platform to get their content out. And apparently, it sounds like a lot of podcasters and YouTubers are going to be contributing to this subscription service. It's a little bit on the, I guess, on the pricey side. It's at the, I think, the $10 a month mark. What's interesting about this is they actually do have some numbers here. I think at the end of the article, they did this on a Kickstarter. They actually used a Kickstarter to raise about $200,000 before the launch. And so that's a kind of a unique approach there. And then they actually, I think there's some numbers at the end of the article here, where they talk about that basically what they're talking about is that this is going to be a small niche platform. And I've talked about before about how I feel like media is going in that direction kind of anyway. So I think it's kind of interesting that you're going to have this sort of very small, politically based platform that they are interested in doing things like shows, like TV shows. One thing that's kind of funny, because they are a left-leaning network, if you will, a left-leaning streaming service, but they don't have a lot of money. In fact, they're kind of saying that that's one of the appeals of this is, hey, we don't have any dark money. I don't know how dark money works in that, a corporate side, but whatever. That's what they're saying. And because of that, because they don't have a lot of money, they can't actually use union actors because they can't afford to pay union actors union wages. They say they use union standards, but they can't actually directly work with the unions. And I will say, as an indie producer, it's a pain in the butt dealing with the unions because it does entail a lot of paperwork. It does inflate your budget, all of those kinds of things. But what's interesting about this is that I think this is one of the paths you can go with the streaming wars to navigate it, interestingly enough. Because if you have sort of a laser target on what you want, and you're willing to sacrifice the larger audience, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to sacrifice the larger audience completely. I feel like Hollywood's already sacrificing the larger audience, but these guys feel like they have to sacrifice even more. But I think this can actually work, because I think in terms of a way of navigating the streaming wars and a way of actually surviving the streaming wars is if you have a laser focus on who your audience is and you're kind of reasonable with your budget, you can do something like this.
Okay, so here's my reaction. So it's for the 99%. Right?
That's what they say. Yeah, it's for the 99%.
Okay, all right. So it's for everyone else who isn't in the 1%. Okay. Let me just say, as a member of that 99% who is in the 1% by a stretch of the imagination, not interested. Now, let me also add that their unique selling point or niche is that they're intentionally going after these particular worldviews and activist sort of approaches that isn't it everywhere already? I mean, I don't understand. Let me put it this way. Their unique selling niche right now just sounds like a lot of noise. Okay. I don't mean to get political, but I'll tell you right now, it just sounds like a lot of noise. Now, we don't normally get into politics, but politically speaking, I probably have more libertarian tendencies than anything else. Okay. I've always been a little bit more physically conservative, and I've always been maybe socially, maybe a little bit more liberal. Okay. But I don't understand the point of this. It's like they're launching something. They don't have the money for it. They can't pay union wages. That's just what they represent.
Well, they claim here, just so I clarify that, it says they pay union rates, Sarah June says, but currently don't have the budget to work with the actual unions. Which, of course, begs the question, if they are paying the rates, why can't they work with the union? Because that's pretty much what the big sticking point is. But that's what the quote is.
I know, but the point is this, okay? Good luck with whatever they're trying to do. I don't get it. Because they're charging for this, right?
Correct. It's a subscription service. I believe it's $10 a month, which they acknowledge is on the pricier side because Apple TV and Disney Plus are less than that with a lot more content.
But wouldn't Netflix for the 99% be free?
You would think, right?
That's what I'm saying. Okay, there is no point in this whole pitch where I'm like going, okay. And I'm not even touching on the whole communist thing, but it's just the idea that it's like, okay, this is Netflix for 99%, but you're going to pay for it, and you're going to pay more than you're paying for something else. We pay union wages, but we don't have the money for it. We're trying to raise money. It's just, I don't. And for example, like, I mean, they're providing a platform, it sounds like, for podcasters and sort of left-leaning media, okay? Because there's not enough of that in the world today, okay? There's all kinds of platforms for podcasters. Anchor, one of our one and only currently wonderful sponsor, you can go start a left-leaning podcast on Anchor tomorrow. It doesn't cost you a dime. That's media for the 99% and even the people who produce it. All you got to do is hook up a mic and a camera, or actually, Anchor's a podcast. All you got to do is hook up a mic to your computer, your phone, and you can just go. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I don't understand the point of any of this, other than they like the idea of creating their own version of Netflix. Okay, well, who wouldn't? I'd like to create my own version of Netflix. Eric, wouldn't you like to create your own version of Netflix too? I think everyone would right now. Okay. I don't understand the point of this whole thing they're trying to do. Good luck for them. Okay, have at it. Do whatever you got to do. I don't know. I don't get the. My reaction is okay. I don't understand what they're trying. It's like I'm like trying to understand the hook here. It's like if you say Netflix for the 99%, it better darn well be free, because that's your unique selling advantage. We're just like Netflix, but we're free. But they're not. They're not. They're kind of more expensive than the other pay services. So
no, that's what I was going to get to right here. Is so it says that they are doing a $10 per month fee, which would be a big chunk of what they're saying is the ideal. There's a study that's cited in here that says that the average consumer is willing to pay about $38 a month for their streaming services. So for all their streaming services, that they have $38 a month to pay. So it says, Means TV's $10 per month fee would be a big chunk of that, especially for folks looking at the $7 monthly price tag of Disney Plus or the $5 one for Apple streaming service, because those are much cheaper services. And speaking of free, Peacock, is supposed to be coming out pretty soon, and Peacock is going to have a free ad-based version. The thing that I thought was interesting about this is the fact that these people did start this streaming service through a Kickstarter with relatively little money, and they do have some subscribers. I wish I could find that number. It was low, but it is in the article. They do mention how many subscribers they have at this point. And I do think that there's a possibility with the streaming wars, there's going to be kind of two scenarios that I see happening. One is going to be massive consolidation, where it's cable all over again, and it's going to be something like YouTube TV or something like that, or even Amazon coming together and putting all these channels together and giving you a package for $38 a month, where you have Disney Plus, CBS All Access, ESPN Plus, you know what I mean? Where it's going to be like this big smorgasbord of content, But I also think that a strategy to survive the streaming wars is to realize I'm never going to get that big audience. I've just got to specialize, I've just got to specialize and be okay with the fact that my audience is small, but as long as I can sustain my business model, I can do this, So that's what I think was interesting about this. The actual content, I'll tell you right now, I'm never going to watch it. There's no way I'm going to pay $10 for this. You know what I mean? Especially since they mentioned in this article that a lot of their people are doing exactly what you just said, Dave. They're already on YouTube. They're already on other platforms. They've just made a deal to be on this platform as well. And right off the bat, it's like, so you're saying this guy has all his stuff for free on YouTube, but you want me to pay for it on your platform? Well, some people are going to like the convenience of it being all packaged together for them and filtered for them. And it becomes sort of like a brand recognition thing where you have our seal of approval. You are a true leftist. You know what I mean? You can play in our playground. Hey, Man of Sand is back. We missed you. I don't think you came last time. He said, they sound like amateurs who think they've invented the wheel but it's a square wheel. And it could be very true. Could be very true. Dan adds packages of streaming service is just cable again. Right. That's my point. That's where that's kind of my biggest prediction of what's going to happen. But again, what I'm trying to say is looking at a smaller market, and if you can sustain it, that is another strategy to survive the streaming wars.
But see, we already have an example of this. If the DC universe survives what's going to be happening, there's your case study of if something can service a niche audience and survive. Because one of the most unique selling, I was going to say, one of the most unique selling points about DC Universe is, I wish they'd be a sponsor on the show. One of the unique new things about DC Universe is the fact that with DC Universe, they're putting a lot of the comic book content on there that you can read as a part of that service. So in addition to be able to watch, you know, some of the older shows where you're talking about Constantine, or you're talking about some of the newer shows like Krypton or Gotham, whatever. What are the other things? Actually, I'm not sure if you can watch Gotham on there anymore. But anyhow, I know you at one point you could watch Krypton because I was watching Krypton on there. But, you know, and a lot of the DC animated films and a lot of the classic films, whether you're talking about the Michael Keaton Batman movies, Christopher Reeve Superman movies, all of that content is on there. They even went through the trouble, and as a DC fan, it makes my heart feel good. They actually went through the trouble to actually clean up, restore, and put up these amazing versions of the original Captain Marvel, the Shazam live action series that Filmation produced. That stuff's amazing. I wish they'd do the same thing for the anime cartoon. That stuff's better. But anyhow, they went through all that trouble, and they have all this amazing content. You can read all these amazing collections of comics work, including a lot of stuff I personally worked on. And that's on the DC Universe app. And also, I don't get a royalty from that, so I'm just telling you, I'm totally just doing this out of the goodness of my heart. But that's a case study. If DC Universe survives what's happening here, that's definitely a niche audience.
But DC Universe is also part of AT&T, Time Warner, and all that stuff. So the one thing about this thing is these are some little guys that are trying to get in on this. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm just saying that it's an approach that could work, because if you, for instance, the obvious thing to say would be, well, what about having a right-leaning one? You know what I mean? Having one that's right-leaning content or something like that. Could there be a market for that? There is. What that market is I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how big that market actually would be. But if you're willing to actually take the time and figure out what that market would be, you're able to prove what that market could be, and you can exist within that market, you can have a good product. I mean, you know, a successful product, I should say. It's not good or bad. It's a successful product in a way of having something maybe a little bit different than what everybody else is trying to do.
Right. Well, I see what you're saying about honing in and focusing on a particular niche. And, you know, for example, like if someone, well, again, someone would have to have some deep pockets. But I mean, if someone could go and rescue Stargate from MGM, you know, you could, because I think at one time they did have some kind of a Stargate app or a Stargate service. And
I think so too,
paying into. Yeah, so that's another example. I mean, you could build a service just around Stargate. There's a niche, interesting audience that's kind of fun. I'd support the Space 1999 thing. So, you know, I mean, you can. I don't. For me, I understand what you're saying, Eric, in terms of the idea of focusing on niche audience, marketing to them, catering to them, and basically curating all this amazing content that is specifically geared towards that audience. I get that. Whether you want to talk about genre, whether you want to talk about political slant, whatever, I get that. But when, in this particular instance, judging by what I was just reading as you were kind of going over it, I don't understand what their unique selling point is. Their unique selling point is everything that's happening in the media already, okay? And I don't have a problem with all of it, but I'm just saying, let's just be honest. It's in media already. And then a lot of their content creators that are coming on to be a part of this, they're already in media in other places where you can listen to them or watch them for free. And they have no money and they can't really pay union wages, but they like the idea. So I'm just saying, I don't understand what their unique selling advantage is in this. If you're going to, again, if you say we are the Netflix for the 99%, you should be free. There you go. I'll probably get a lot of hate mail for this, but let me just say right now, I'm much more libertarian in my political views. Okay, I support a lot of social things that I think are important. So I'm not totally right wing, but in this particular instance, after reading that article, I don't understand what their unique selling advantage is just from a marketing standpoint. If they hired me, if they hired Dave Beatty Studios to come in and like handle their marketing, I would literally be sitting there scratching my head going, I don't know how to sell this because you're just doing what everyone else is doing and you have no money. Bye. All right.
No, I hear you.
Okay. I only have one streaming wars thing, and it's just going to be real brief because I was kind of surprised to read this. So we've been talking about Disney Plus. We talked about the Bob Iger exit that happened recently. This article actually comes from the AV Club .com. It's by Britt Hayes, and it says new Tron series among 3 shows scrapped by Disney Plus. So we've got an image here. This is obviously from the last Tron movie, and it says, show of hands, how many of you signed up for Disney Plus ahead of its launch last November? Okay, now, how many of you still subscribe to Disney Plus now that the first season of The Mandalorian is over? We can't actually see you, but we'll go ahead and guess that a fair amount of you have canceled your subscriptions, and understandably so, given that Disney hasn't exactly fulfilled its initial promise. The uploading of new content, both original titles and classics from the vault, have been slow going. And of the original offerings available, only a couple have stood out, Baby Yoda's show included. All of which is to say that THR's latest report, which reveals that one of Bob Iger's new goals is to fix Disney Plus, isn't very surprising. The lengthy piece goes into behind the scenes of the streaming service newcomer, which has trouble establishing a strong identity for itself beyond the basic Disney branding. And as it turns out, a Disney product will make plenty of money, but it hasn't exactly made much in the way of good entertainment. Per THR's report, Disney Plus has more than 50 scripted shows and some 50 unscripted shows in development, which seems both wildly ambitious and potentially ill-advised. 3 original titles were scrapped, including the previously announced Muppets Live Another Day from Adam Horowitz, Eddie Kitsis, and Josh Gad, Book of Enchantment, which would have featured Disney villains, and a new Tron adaptation from American Crime's John Ridley, which wasn't made public until now. And it is probably the biggest downer of the bunch, depending upon how you feel about Tron. So this is a very interesting story and article talking about basically things at Disney Plus that have already been scrapped that we didn't even have a chance to even get a sense for what it was going to be like. I remember when they announced that Muppet, new Muppet show, I was very interested in that. Well, it looks like it's not coming, everyone. And apparently they're working on a fun Tron follow-up, and they're not going to do that either. So I am still subscribed to Disney Plus. We do. I know my wife was watching some of the National Geographic stuff the other day. I haven't watched much on it since The Mandalorian ended. And I would have quite enjoyed this Tron show. I would like to see someone revisit the Black Hole. I mean, Disney owns so much amazing content, and I'm just kind of shocked that they're having a hard time figuring out what to do with it. That's just my humble opinion. But it's an interesting article talking about some of the troubles and the travails, and mentions the fact of something we've spoken about previously, that Bob Iger is basically sort of stepping down in order to try and go over and fix Disney Plus, because I think at the end of the day, Disney Plus will be part of his legacy, his legacy of running Disney. So, had you heard about this, Eric? That there'd been a Tron series that Disney Plus was working on, and they threw it away?
No, I hadn't specifically heard about a Tron series, but this actually touches on an article that I'd wanted to talk about, but I'm cutting for time. Where it was specifically about, what's Disney going to look like when Bob Iger really leaves, and what his legacy is going to be. And it even got into some of the kind of the infighting politics of some of the disappointment with some of the executives that didn't get the go ahead. Over was it Chapman? Chapman is the new CEO of Disney, Bob Chapman. So it's kind of interesting because the theme here is that Disney Plus has a real content problem. They have a content problem. To answer the question from the article, I do not have Disney Plus anymore. I got rid of that. Okay, I'm not subscribing to Disney Plus. Clone Wars was not enough of a grab for me. I've never really been into Clone Wars, to be honest. Although I actually liked the movie, which nobody likes the movie. I actually saw it in the theater. I actually liked it. But I don't own it. I don't. It's not part of my collection. But Disney Plus has a real content problem, and it seems these problems are getting worse. The article that I want to talk about, Obi-Wan has been postponed. They're talking about all sorts. They're talking about Hawkeye may have been postponed. Disney's not admitting that. They admitted Obi-Wan. They haven't admitted whether Hawkeye is being postponed. There are some problems going on in terms of content creation at Disney Plus right now. I don't know where the disconnect is. Well, I know where it is in Lucasfilm. I know exactly where it is in Lucasfilm. So there's a lack of leadership at Lucasfilm. That's the bottom line. However much control Kathleen Kennedy actually has, whether she's in quote unquote control or not, there's a lack of leadership at Lucasfilm, and it's showing. And they're going to hopefully not screw up Mandalorian, because Mandalorian is either wrapped or close to being wrapped for the second season. That's not going to be out until what, like November? So
well, it did get moved up because originally there was going to be, I think, a longer wait for Mandalorian. I think they moved Mandalorian up because they realized they need something to keep people around.
Moved up to when?
So,
moved up to when?
I don't remember. I know it's going to be this year, but I think originally it was not intended to be. I think the original intention.
The last one I heard was November. That was the last. That was the last time frame that I heard.
I think that's that kind of gels. But the only point I'm making is originally I think it was going to be even further out, and they actually pushed it up.
Okay, well that just shows my point.
That's what I'm saying.
Disney has a huge content problem. They're also having a branding issue. The article that I was going to talk about also talked about the new Lizzie McGuire series that's supposed to be coming out, and the fact that there's a sort of conflict about whether it's supposed to be on Disney Plus or Hulu because of this branding issue, which I don't think is rocket science. I mean, you use Disney Plus for more of the family-friendly fare. That's what Disney's always stood for, and you use Hulu for the more mature content. I said it last time. I said it last week, and I'll say it again. Disney's bundle could be a knockout punch in the streaming wars. If you have with Disney Plus, family-friendly content, with ESPN Plus, if you actually had live sporting events on that damn thing, because I will say it again, ESPN Plus sucks and is practically false advertisement. But if they actually had some live sporting stuff on there, and then you have Hulu with the more adult content, that could be a knockout punch. That could be the winning combination. And I think Iger knows it. Iger knows he's put the pieces together in acquiring these companies. He just got to get them to deliver the damn content. And that's where the problem is. There is like a content chokehold for some reason on these platforms, and I don't know why. I don't know exactly why or what's going on. Seems ridiculous to me that we did not get a Marvel series right after Mandalorian. That's the first thing I would have done. Whether it's WandaVision or the Loki or Falcon, I would have had one of those right after Mandalorian to use Baby Yoda and to build on that momentum. Instead, what they did is they gave us another season of Clone Wars. And I know there's a lot of people that love Clone Wars, but I think that's an example going back to my Streaming Wars article. That's your little niche market. That if you're okay with a little small market, a subsection of Star Wars fans that really love and are obsessed with Clone Wars, I'm sure you can make money off of that. But that's not what Disney Plus is supposed to be. Disney Plus is supposed to be like a massive, massive tent for everyone. Family-friendly content, everybody. But they have a real content problem. The legacy stuff is great, but when you've already seen that. The people that want that stuff, they've already seen it. So how many times are they going to see it again when a lot of them probably already have the DVD or the Blu-ray anyway? So I think there's a real disconnect there. They've got to get that new content going, because that's really what draws people in. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people staying. That's one thing that Netflix is doing. Netflix is constantly having new content. They've got so much damn new content on Netflix. I don't even know half of the stuff that's on there. Yeah, I think people say it all the time. Content is king, and Disney Plus has a content problem. I think it would have been neat to see this Tron series, but it should have been ready to go already. It should have been ready to go. Instead, they're canceling it before it even gets started. This should have been ready to go on, like, not if not day one, because I think day one they did good with Mandalorian. Mandalorian did carry the streaming service, but they didn't have a follow up. They needed a follow up. It could have been Tron. It could have been one of these other series that we're talking about. It could be the Lindsay McGuire thing. But again, they're having a problem with branding. So I don't know.
Well, I thought this is something interesting to bring up. And Disney Plus, if you're having a hard time figuring out what to do with that classic science fiction film, The Black Hole, and you're wanting to do a streaming service show for it, let me just tell you right now, I have a great idea, and I have an amazing producer I want to work with, and we could produce a really great science fiction show that would follow up that classic film, The Black Hole, for your Disney Plus service. So I'm just going to throw my hat into the arena right there. Anyhow,
absolutely. There you go.
So, yeah, so that's all I've got for the streaming wars. Do you have anything else for tonight's show that you want to touch on?
No, I said I'm cutting my second one for time, and I got some of that info out anyway. So,
okay, cool. So here's the important thing, just real quick before we go into our last segment. I need you to pick a number between 1 and 4.
I will say 3.
3. All right. Well, congratulations to Mr. Dan Stevens. It looks like you are the winner. The most votes actually was for Black Adam. So I'll be contacting you sometime after the show. Probably not this evening, probably tomorrow. I'm going to try and reach out and contact you and get your information if you would like to receive this. This is a Black Adam original sketch card. This is from the DC Supervillain set. The artwork is by me. This is an official one. You can tell me a little hollow foil up there. But I want to congratulate you for winning this original art sketch card. Okay, cool. All right, so are we ready to go into
cool. Segment? Very, very cool. And Dan Stevens is grateful. He says awesome.
Very cool, very cool. You won't have quite the wait that anyone else did because I've got everything in house. I've got all the supplies, the mailing stuff, everything's ready to go.
Right on.
So that'll be fun.
And Dan, that was the one that I voted for, even though my vote doesn't count. That was the card that I liked too. So
yeah. Well, very cool. All right. So again, congratulations to Dan, and thanks for being part of the show. All right. So are we ready to move into our last segment for this evening?
Let's do it.
Okay. Very cool. So here we are at our second topic of the night. We are talking about the Netflix documentary, The Power of Grayskull. Unfortunately, Eric, it's with an A. I did the same thing on the teaser graphic. It's GRAYSKULL. That's hilarious. I did the same thing. I could have swore it was with an E, but it's actually an A.
I'll fix that.
It's all good. I'm going to set it back up here in a segment. Everybody bear with us. I did the same thing. I did the teaser graphic. I put it together, and I sent it out. And I think some people actually got the emails in the email newsletter because I could have swore it was gray with an E, but it's actually an A.
There you go.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Like I said, I've made the same mistake, and I've been reading He-Man comics and loving He-Man since I was a kid. And I didn't realize it was with an A either. So let's just go ahead and set it back up. So here we are at our second topic on tonight's episode. We're talking about The Power of Grayskull. This is the Netflix documentary that is available now. It is an absolutely fantastic documentary, in my humble opinion. I'm going to just kind of go over some general impressions. The first impression is going to be this. If you love He-Man, if you love Masters Universe, if you are a child of the 80s, why have you not watched this documentary? You could say, I don't have Netflix, which I could say, I'm sorry. But anyhow, if you have Netflix, if you have access to Netflix, if you know someone who has access to Netflix, you owe it to yourself to watch this Power of Grayskull documentary. It answers every question you could possibly have about He-Man, including some you even didn't know that you needed answered. If you enjoyed, also on Netflix, they have The Toys That Made Us. If you enjoyed the He-Man episode, this is that times 10. And it is so thoroughly fascinating because they delve into other things that obviously the Toys That Made Us doesn't. They do a deep dive into the film, which I'm excited to talk about. It is absolutely amazing. Cannot recommend this documentary enough. So, tell me, Eric, had you heard about the Power of Grayskull documentary on Netflix?
I don't recall hearing about it until you pitched the idea of us reviewing it. I don't specifically remember hearing about this documentary. Not sure why. Apparently, that this was a Kickstarter funded project, so I assume that it was out there for quite a while they were trying to raise the funds and also do the interviews. You can tell a lot of the interviews are done at conventions and things like that. That's where a lot of the interviews are done for a lot of the participants. But yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised, to have you recommend this to me and have a chance to view it. I grew up as a He-Man fan. I really feel like the movie is kind of very underrated, sort of like a cult classic, if you will. I understand the problems of it, but I own it. And that's a high praise for me because I don't have a huge DVD or a Blu-ray collection. And I do own Masters of the Universe. I saw it in the theater, and they do talk about this. In fact, I feel like I want to do my own Masters of the Universe movie documentary just on that. If anything, I want more. But seeing the process of the creation and everything like that, it's really quite fascinating to me. And I really enjoyed it, and I do recommend this to people that are fans of He-Man. That are fans of things or interested in things like toy manufacturing. We don't have a lot of behind the scenes where we talk about how toys are brought to life and the people that bring those toys to life. And it's really neat to see that, and then also see the filmation people and the story of filmation. I really enjoyed it. It's a good film.
It's really interesting because they talk about how at the beginning of the documentary, they talk about that for toy sales, back in the late 70s, early 80s, the thing that really drove toy sales was basically licensed properties. So they talk a lot about how securing those licenses and producing those toys, how that was an important part of basically the overall strategy of selling toys to children. One of the ones they highlight, which was interesting, is Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And that Clash of the Titans was interesting because they managed to get everything together. They got all the product and everything tooled up, ready to go. They got it in stores, and that the toys were selling great until people actually started seeing the movie. And then the toy sales basically flattened out. It's interesting. I remember having a bunch of the Clash of the Titans toys when I was a kid. And
my brother loved that movie more than Star Wars. My brother loved that movie.
I still like it. I still like Clash of the Titans. And I prefer the original one to the remake they made too. There's just something interesting about the original one that's so kind of fun. But it's just interesting that they talk about all that and how important that was. And because of what had happened with some of the previous licenses that hadn't gone well, for example, like with Clash of the Titans, that they basically ended up passing on Star Wars, which ended up being the huge boon for Kenner, and actually took Kenner from being sort of like an annoying competitor and actually catapulted them to the stratosphere as the toy maker of basically, I think, several decades after that. It was very interesting. And that in the process of trying to find something that would work, that they were doing kind of market research stuff. And a lot of things were driven by this market research and this toy testing they were doing with children. And He-Man kind of spins out of that. But the thing that made He-Man unique was the fact that it was an in-house created property that the company owned outright. So they didn't have to spend a lot of money licensing things. And it's interesting
there is the Conan controversy though, and they do address that in this documentary because they did have a license to produce the Conan toys, and obviously there's tons of comparisons between Conan and He-Man, and they do address it directly that they were going forward with the Conan toys, even though they found out after. It's kind of funny that you think like a big company like Hasbro, especially as big as, right? Not Hasbro, it's Mattel, right?
Mattel,
That made
Mattel.
He-Man. Mattel. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to mess that up.
Right.
So Mattel, big company, especially as big as it is today, you know, Barbie and things like that, these huge products that they have, they didn't realize when they got the Conan license that Conan was going to be rated R. I'm like, who the hell was working in your licensing department? You know what I mean? That they didn't know stuff like that, you know? But they got the Conan license and they were kind of disappointed because they found out later that it was rated R. And there's a controversy about that because they actually, I think they got sued because basically the producers of Conan were saying, hey, you just screwed us with your He-Man thing. You were supposed to be making Conan toys. Instead, you're just doing your own thing with He-Man, which is a ripoff of Conan. And they do address that and say that they did produce the Conan toys, at least to some stage, and nobody wanted them. The buyers just didn't want them, and that's what happened with Conan.
Well, it's interesting too because they do talk, but part of the point of that whole story too is that they talk about the failure of Clash of the Titans, and then they talk about the Conan thing, and there seems to be no one calls it out. I do think there's this kind of underlying subtext that sort of, when they saw the questionable content of Conan, they just knew immediately, well, this is just never going to work. And I think also too, they realized, well, if Clash of the Titans isn't going to work, how is this thing going to work? You know, Conan didn't have the.
That's not what they said in the documentary, though. In the documentary, he said that they made the Conan toys, just nobody wanted them. That's what that was the assertion in the documentary.
In my opinion, I'm drawing my own conclusions. I just feel like there's this subtext that I think they were kind of like going, okay, if this doesn't work, I don't see how this is going to work.
Man of Sand mentions there was a Conan cartoon made that wasn't rated R. Was that in the same era? I don't remember the Conan cartoon.
The Conan cartoon, I think, was in the 90s. It was actually quite a bit after. The Conan animated cartoon was about the same time as that live action TV series. They had a lot of people forget there's like all these forgotten versions of like Zorro and Conan where they made these shows. They were on like some of the syndicated networks that would pick them up. This same era the Conan cartoon was made was when you saw the Phantom 2040, which is the Phantom in the future. You had the Highlander animated series. Nobody remembers the Highlander animated series anymore. There was a whole bunch of stuff.
I do remember the Highlander animated series. I actually do remember that.
But that's the same time period.
But I don't think, to get more to Man of Sand's point, I think, question, but I don't think that was during the era we're talking about. We're talking about when the first Arnold Schwarzenegger movie came out, and that's the license that Mattel had. They had the license for that.
Yeah, that's
and it's an R-rated movie. So
that was in the 90s, very clearly not during the same time period at all, much later. It's actually after He-Man had already kind of run its course even. But it's interesting how they talk about all that and how it kind of sets the stage for He-Man and the Masters Universe and how everything kind of comes together. They show a lot of really good, like if you're someone who loves looking at art, they show all these really amazing original design concepts for He-Man and Skeletor. They talk about some of the naming and how they were one of the, I can't remember if it was the head of product or marketing or something. He was just trying to keep this whole man theme. So they had He-Man and Beastman and whatever.
No, it wasn't
else.
Beastman. Beastman was like Dogman or something like that originally, or something really silly like that. It was like.
But the craziest one was at one point Merman was actually called Seaman. And it was just like, that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly. And they keep going into it and they just flesh out, like, because I don't want to spoil it, but they just flesh out how this all came about. It was just, I really can't recommend this enough. They talk about the New Adventures of He-Man, which was sort of the more animated spacefaring one that came out after the film.
Oh, I want to talk about that. Okay. Bobby says, the doc was great. Love seeing all the original concept work, and that is a real strength of this documentary, is seeing, what's really neat is you actually see some of these people digging into their personal archive, and you can see a lot of this stuff is just kind of like jammed together. And it's like, oh, here's the original version of this. and it's just like all crumpled up and everything like that. They have to unfold it, and they've got mounds of this stuff because, of course, these artists were producing work all the time. They produce all sorts of stuff that was never produced. You know what I mean? So they've just got mounds of artwork that they show, and they do a pretty nice presentation where they'll really focus on that particular piece of art and the concept art. I mean, I imagine, I wonder if they had like a special, I imagine they had something for their Kickstarter people. And if they had like a gallery or something like that, I actually wanted more of that. I actually wanted to see more of the toys and more of the concept art, because I think that was a real strength of this particular documentary, was all the concept art. And I actually would have liked to have seen a kind of more of a catalog of the toys themselves as well.
Well, and along those lines, I want to recommend, there's a, I tell you what, Eric, do you mind vamping for a few minutes? I'm going to go grab it.
Go ahead. Yeah. So, but in regards to the original concept art, I really enjoyed that in this particular documentary. So I'm going to kind of go off and talk about, because we touched on it, which was the I guess the New Adventures of He-Man. That was one area where I found that this documentary was lacking. I actually remember that show. I did actually watch it when it was on, and I actually kind of liked it. And it's kind of funny because I think the producers of the documentary don't like that series. They kind of are a little dismissive and talk about, like, the way they set it up is they talk about all these kind of silly ideas that people had. Like, apparently there was going to be like a G.I. Joe version of He-Man. There was going to be like a sports version of He-Man. There were going to be all these different versions of He-Man. And then somebody kind of came up with a space version of He-Man. And that led to the, I think it was called the New Adventures of He-Man, which I'll say the artwork is very, very different. But then again, all the iterations, all the different animated He-Mans are very different. But I felt like they really just sort of glossed over that particular version of He-Man. Again, I'm just speculating that the producers just didn't like that version. I know it's not a popular version, but I did watch it when it was first run, and I rather enjoyed it myself and thought it was kind of interesting. Very different art style, but I like science. I like science fiction. I guess it's more sci-fi fantasy, and He-Man always did have that element anyway. They always had vehicles, flying things, robots, all that stuff. So the whole He-Man in space thing wasn't that weird to me. I think it was a way that they can introduce a lot of new characters. And I remember kind of liking that story arc. Man of Sam says the New Adventures of He-Man had a totally different art style and an even more anime look, very different from the Filmation version. And they did address that in the documentary. They talked about that there was a desire to go with a more of an anime style with the New Adventures of He-Man. But I will say, as a small criticism of this documentary, I felt they just kind of brushed aside the New Adventures of He-Man and didn't treat it with a lot of respect, honestly.
Well, I want to bring this up. So there is a fantastic book that actually is available. This is the Art of Masters of the Universe, He-Man, the Master of the Universe. This is so if you love just really great art and concept art, this is the book for you. This thing is absolutely amazing. For example, Eric, you were talking about seeing a lot of the early, concept type art. There's all kinds of amazing stuff in here, featuring all the different versions of the characters. I guess I've got too much glare going on there. Never know which way to go. But there's all kinds of just awesome stuff in here. They've reproduced a lot of the art actually from of course, the mini comics in here.
Oh, nice.
And then they have two. It's just, gosh, just so amazing. There's all kinds of stuff in here. So this book is absolutely amazing. But they have a lot of I'm a huge fan of Earl Norem, who's just this tremendous illustrator, and he did a lot of these just really great He-Man illustrations that they use for a lot of the packaging art and the posters and stuff. I mean, this thing's just full of cool stuff. So, yeah, if you're if you're a He-Man fan, Master Universe fan, I can't recommend this book. And I mean, this thing's just full of this stuff. I mean, it's just full of it. Look at that. So yeah, this book is totally worth the price of admission. This is very much like the Transformers one that we talked on another episode about. If you're an artist, if you create art, if you're looking for something that's fun for inspiration, I recommend this. I recommend the Transformers books, the Lord of the Rings books. I mean, this stuff is just absolutely killer.
Manasan had a comment. I think going back to the New Adventures of He-Man, some people mock the Page Boy haircut of Filmation's He-Man. Was that an attempt to make him more kid-friendly as opposed to an R-rated Conan look? Yeah, I don't remember them talking about his hair because He-Man's hair is actually very distinctive. And that is one topic I don't think they actually talked about in this documentary is where did He-Man's haircut come from?
Yeah, they didn't really talk about that. I would imagine that He-Man's hair is just an outgrowth of what they could do with the limitations of the way the head needs to turn. That would be my thought. And of course, we've got the original He-Man action figure actually here on the screen. So I think it's just the limitations of how the character was sculpted and what they could pull off versus what works with the articulation.
It's a great question, though, and I'm surprised that the filmmakers didn't address it at all because he does have a very distinct hairstyle, both the toy and in the Filmation series. So in fact, I think that's one of the reasons some people didn't like the New Adventures of He-Man was because he had a different hairstyle, and they were like, "That's not He-Man,"
I think overall it was too different. At the end of the day, I didn't hate it, but it just I think it was just too different from what people were familiar with. So I do want to touch on it, and I do want to cover it on the show. I do actually want to talk about the Masters Universe film on the show. I want to do a retrospective on that film at some point, Eric, because I love that movie so very much. And Frank Langella's performance as Skeletor, for me, is still one of the best. I mean, you want to talk about a maniacal, world-conquering villain. I love that his performance as Skeletor. It's so great. From the first moment you see him walking in the throne room and he's putting the ram staff and he's kind of hitting it down as he's walking. And then Evelyn says, after all these years, Grayskull is ours. And he turns around and screams, no! And he sits down and he gets real quiet and he's clutching that staff and he's like, mine. I love that. I love that. It's such a great performance. I love it.
No, it's I can't say in regards to the documentary, I was actually really surprised, very pleasantly surprised how much they got into the film and the fact that Frank Langella and Dolph Lundgren both gave interviews for this documentary. That actually shocked me. It shocked me because I thought that I just had it in my head that these guys wouldn't give them the time of day, which really shows how cool these guys kind of are in my book. You know what I mean? That they did do this documentary and they're super candid and they talk about the hopes, the aspirations, what they were trying to do. Kind of they talk about where they think they might have gone wrong and where the production kind of went wrong. You could do an entire documentary just about the movie. And this particular documentary is packed with content about the movie. And even if you don't like the movie, I always think it's fascinating with movies that are not necessarily box office hits and have sort of a controversy to them and aren't necessarily well received, and kind of seeing the anatomy of how that film was put together and maybe why it has some of these issues. One of the things that was really interesting was seeing the production designer was heavily involved in this documentary and showed his concept art. What's that?
William Stout.
He showed his concept art for when he was putting the film together, and they were trying to decide how He-Man was going to look on screen. And it's really interesting because he had this philosophy that he didn't really think He-Man needed to look like He-Man. And it's funny how filmmakers do this because it happens a lot, when it comes to licensing products and things like that, when a film takes an established license, and we see it all the time. when something that's established in another medium, whether it's comics or toys, is adapted into film or television, a lot of fans get that reaction of, that doesn't look like, so and so. It's funny because the design they went with, he actually said that was his least favorite design, and of course it still pretty much looks like He-Man. You know what I mean? The one they did do on screen. He's got a cape. He-Man didn't really have a cape, but for the most part, he looks like He-Man. Dolph Lundgren's final version, but that's the version he hated. That's the version he didn't like. He had all these other different versions with like armor and things like that. And he makes an interesting point, because there are two modes of thought. Some people are think like, well, the movie doesn't have to be like the cartoon, or doesn't have to be like the toy. We can make it different. It doesn't have to be that way because this is quote unquote real life. And then there are other people that say, no, go with something that's like screen accurate. It's like the Wolverine debate, and people talk about the yellow spandex, and a lot of us still want to see Wolverine in the yellow spandex. And what's funny is when you talk about this stuff and all these different, like for instance, the original X-Men, they changed the suits radically because they said it wouldn't work on screen. Well, we see with the Avengers, they have very classic comic book inspired costumes, and it's what everybody loves and so everybody wants. So it's kind of an interesting philosophy just to see that. For me, as someone who has done some film work, I just think it's interesting to see that different that different approach, and how there are two very different ways of thinking when it comes to this. And especially we have to think about the time when Masters of the Universe was made, and that was during that time it was like the original X-Men. Well, let's put them in something completely different because that stuff wouldn't work. That comic book stuff wouldn't work. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting to see him. And I think of him as designs are pretty cool. But the one thing I wish they would have addressed, because I really, the thing I was most disappointed with in Masters of the Universe in terms of costuming and look, was Teela. I always thought Teela was just like, what? That's not Teela, and that doesn't look anything like Teela. It's like Teela's, very sexy, and they even talked about the toy even is sexy, And the way that they actually ended up doing Teela in the movie, I was always like, why'd you do that? And Frank Langella did mention he said he was in very, very good shape when this movie was made, and he wanted to show off his skin. He wanted to show off his body at that time because he said he had abs and the whole deal. And it's like, well, yeah, why didn't you do that? You know what I mean? I always assumed it was because Frank Langella just wasn't in that great a shape. That's literally what I assumed. Is that's the reason that he doesn't really look more like Skeletor. And he said he wanted to look more like the screen version of Skeletor because he knew about He-Man, because the whole reason he really did it was because his son was such a big He-Man fan. Stuff like that is fascinating to me.
Well, here's just a couple things real quick. First one is William Stout is absolutely fantastic artist. I've had many, many conversations with him back in the days that I used to attend San Diego Comic-Con. I own a lot of his sketchbooks. I'm a huge fan. And I've had actually more than a couple of conversations with him about his work on Masters Universe, actually one-to-one personally. And it was a real jazz, and I had a lot of fun actually seeing him like in the documentary and hearing him talk about, because I'd heard a lot of those things before, actually from him. So it's interesting to see him on the documentary talking about them. But here's how I view the Masters Universe film. And like I said, I want to cover this on the show and do a major deep dive on this film. I have always viewed the Masters Universe film as how the cartoon ends. So Skeletor and He-Man are constantly having all these battles, the never-ending battles that happen, that establish everything. That's the cartoon. And then the movie is how it all ends. Skeletor's older, He-Man, like everyone's older. Years have passed. They've been in constant battle. Skeletor has finally managed to claim Castle Grayskull. He's going to take the power. This is it. He's conquered Eternia. It is the conflict between him and He-Man. It's all about to come to an end, and that's what the film depicts. So it's many, many years after the cartoon. He-Man has given up his identity as Prince Adam. Everyone just knows that he's He-Man. That's the way I've always viewed the movie. And in my mind, from the first time I saw it, that's the feeling I got from it. And so I've never really had a lot of questions about any of the inconsistencies in terms of its relatability to the cartoon, because I always felt like, well, this is their final battle. This is how it ends. This is the end, for the cartoon. So that's my own personal view on the film and how I've always looked at it. And that's how, because I remember the first time I saw it, I had that feeling. Well, this is the final battle. This is how it all ends. So that's my
Except
own
it doesn't.
particular view.
Except it doesn't. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen Masters of the Universe.
I know.
One of the first post-credit scenes ever.
Yeah. I'll be back.
Yeah, I always love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, I had this thing for a while that I thought every movie should end with Skeletor coming out of the sludge and being like, "I'll be back." Like just every movie in existence, no matter what genre, should just the ending after the credits roll, Skeletor should just come out saying, "I'll be back." I really think that should be a thing.
Man, if they'd had that at the end of an MCU movie, everybody would have lost their minds trying to figure out who that was. What is he talking about?
That's why they need to do it. That's why they need to do it. Like I said, every film, regardless of genre, I don't care if it's like some drama about the Holocaust. At the end, Hitler comes out, the sludge.
Right.
I'll be back. But no, I like that film a lot, but I do question some of the visual choices, and it was interesting to see the production designer defending those choices and talking about that and talking about some of the limitations and things that he had as far as concerns or whatever. I love a lot of the design. Like I wish they were used more, because I liked the Eternian like soldiers, and I also liked the Skeletor shock troops. I loved those when I was a kid. The shock troops, they reminded me a lot of stormtroopers, but I just thought they were really, really cool. Really, really cool. And I used to like reenact those battles in my living room all the time with those shock troopers and stuff like that, because there's some great action scenes when those shock troopers are attacking and stuff like that, breaking through windows and stuff like that. Overall, I really like the movie, but I do have some questions about some of the visual choices. So honestly, I think it could have been a lot sexier than it was. I mean, I think is the best way I can put it, because the only one who's really showing skin is Dolph Lundgren as He-Man.
Right.
Tila, Evelyn, and apparently, even Frank Angela saying that he could have pulled it off too. I mean, that is a big part of it as far as the visual stuff goes. Get people that are in good shape, and because that is a big part of He-Man. I mean, it really is. So it's called He-Man. I mean, let's just go for it.
Right.
It's called He-Man. Right. So let's have some really good in shape actors, and let's show some skin and all that kind of stuff. That's just my thing. So
I did love too in the documentary hearing how much Frank Langella, enjoyed playing Skeletor, how he approached it. And it was just so much fun, because in my mind, when I think of him in between filming those scenes, I see him approaching it and taking it very seriously in the context of the film. And it was so great to hear him talk about the film, and that's pretty much what he did. I just love the idea of what I imagined how he would approach it was how he was actually approaching it. Because I love that part where and they talk about, trying to give Skeletor all these wonderful lines. And one of my favorites is that where he talks about, "Tell me about the loneliness of good, He-Man. Is it like the loneliness of evil?" Like, I love all that stuff.
Love that.
Oh,
I love that line.
Oh my goodness.
I do too. I love that line. I love that line.
So great.
And I would say, I think a lot of fans probably think that Frank Langella didn't like this, and like it's sort of like a dirty secret for him. And no, he says that he really was into it. You know what I mean? And he's proud of the work and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of refreshing to see, because a lot of times when you have some of these very well-established actors, they do something, that's really genre-y, you know what I mean? Or like I said, in this case, it was not like a huge box office hit. They kind of disown it, and they won't talk about it. I mean, even look at Harrison Ford's the way he is with Star Wars, you know what I mean? And that like made his career, and it's a huge thing. And you'll see the way they treat it. And he's not like that. He's like, "That's some of my best work," you know what I mean? Like,
I know. I love that. I love that. That's one of the things that, because for me, when I look at, because he played Dracula too. Like, he's played some amazing roles. But I just love his turn as Skeletor, because it's, you just don't, the power mad dictator villain kind of character is something we're kind of getting further and further away as villains become more nuanced and more layered and more textured and blah, 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 blah. I get it. Okay. But in the never-ending battle between good and evil, you need that great villain. And Langella is so great as Skeletor. And he finds a way to make it uniquely his, still Skeletor in every aspect of the word, but at the same point, he does bring a gravitas and kind of a grounded aspect of it. When he's kind of talking to Evelyn and he's like, why do the people resist? I count on you for these things, and he's just being there's just this wonderful thing about it. And it's like, he's totally evil and to the core, but he's so fascinating,
But is he really, Dave? Is he really at the end of the day?
Yes, he is. That's one of the things I love about this portrayal. He is. And seriously,
I'll tell you something. Growing up during the 80s, there's this reason that we call this the retro rogues, and we are the retro rogues. I have always identified with the villains in so much of the stuff I grew up with, because they always lost. And therefore, I would feel sorry for the villains, and I would be kind of like, why can't Skeletor win a couple times? Why can't Megatron win a couple times? You know what I mean? Why can't, G.I. Joe was the worst. It was like, why can't the Cobra guys actually shoot anybody? That's why I like the comics, by the way. Because in the G.I. Joe comics, they killed characters, they shot characters. Cobra was dangerous,
Yeah.
But that kind of stuff, because I grew up on so much of it, I really had an affinity for those characters. I like Skeletor more than I like He-Man. You know what I mean? I like Cobra Commander more than I like Duke, especially Destro. Destro has a lot of layers too, and I like Destro more than I like Duke or Hawk or any of those characters. Not the same with Transformers. Optimus Prime is the best. I mean, I'm not going to go that far. Optimus Prime to me is like Superman level superhero to me, but I still thought it would be. Well, I can't say that because they actually killed Optimus Prime in the movie, so they totally went overboard in that regard. They actually killed him in the first movie, but I did have like this affinity growing up, because to me the bad guys almost became like the underdog. You know what I mean? It was like they were constantly losing, but they kept trying. They kept trying. One day I'll get you. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing. So
I was just gonna say that's why one of the things I love about the Master Universe movie, because it's Skeletor's day. He's won. That's where the movie starts. It's like, finally, after all this time.
I remember as a kid, I was like,
I love that.
I was like, this is so cool. Skeletor won. He took Grayskull. You know what I mean? Like, Dan Stevens says, I started liking wolves because they were always beat down in the fairy tales. And I can relate to this. It's funny. I had a conversation with my kids not too long ago. We talk about our favorite animals. I always say it's the wolf. The wolf is my favorite animal. I've even been called a lone wolf before, and things like that. So I relate to that as well. So, but you're right. We could do an entire episode about just the movie. So I think we should talk a little bit more, go back a little ways.
Yeah, that's true.
And we should talk about things like, one of the things I always thought was all the different continuities. Like, I remember reading some of the mini comics, and I wish I still had some. I don't know what happened to them, because I did have some He-Man figures from the first generation and stuff like that. And I know I had some of those comics. And I remember those mini comics, the story was like so different than what Filmation did. And they did talk about that in the documentary a little bit.
Well, what's interesting about the very first one, which is the Power Sword one, that's the one that's actually pictured in a graphic there. I still have that one. I have a lot of my original He-Man mini comics. They actually, just like the book I showed you earlier, they did actually collect all the He-Man mini comics into one huge volume. It's about $50. It's totally worth the price of admission. It's so wonderful. But the artwork by Alfredo Alcala, and if I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly, I apologize, but I have loved his work since I was a kid. I have some of his actually Spanish language only things that he's done that I picked up from collectors over the years because I love his work. And it's because of the Power Sword story that I actually got with my original He-Man action figure. And what's interesting about that Power Sword mini comic story is, number one, it's not really like a comic book. It's more like an illustrated story. Number two, the artwork is completely beautiful. And then number three, even though Skeletor is evil, he comes across a little bit like a misunderstood guy when you read that, because he's basically talking about the origin of Skeletor. He's basically accidentally been pulled through a portal that some of the wizards and different people who used to own Grayskull who've disappeared, they were apparently doing some manipulation of something, and he was actually ripped from his planet and brought to Eternia and trapped there. And part of the reason he wants to control Grayskull is so he can open a portal and go back to his homeworld. Of course, he also wants to bring more of his people there and conquer Eternia, but that's just beside his real goal is really to go home. He's just like E.T. He just wants to go home. But it's really interesting, and I love the artwork. The artwork is beautiful. I've always loved Alfredo Alcala's ink work, the watercolor treatment to the art. It's so beautiful. Like, I literally, when I was doing Bushy Tales, I used to pull that out and flip through it and hope I would somehow pull inspiration from that mini comic. Because the world of Bushy Tales, one of my early creator-owned series, was intended to be, in my mind anyway, like my version of that idea. And unfortunately, Dan, let me apologize right now. The wolves actually are villainous characters in Bushy Tales because they are villainous characters in all of, old school literature. So as a true hack, I took that idea and ran with it. Of course, my wolves were actually werewolves. They weren't just regular wolves. They were a group of ancient Greeks called the Pelasgians who were actually cursed, and they turned to wolves, and it's revealed throughout the story that initially you think these creatures that are hunting everyone you think are just wolves, eventually they're revealed to be actually werewolves, and they've been cursed for centuries by the ancient Greek gods. But anyhow, I've pulled so much inspiration, and I love those He-Man mini comics so much. And there's so much just wonderful material, and I've tortured people with my horrible He-Man pitch idea. I've even tortured Eric with it because I would love to revisit the world of He-Man and do something with it, because I think there's so much wonderful material here. And that's one of the things that's really great about this Power of Grayskull documentary on Netflix is you're watching it. And we're not sponsored by Netflix, by the way. It's just a wonderful documentary. But
we should say that is actually one of the big motivations for why we decided to do this, was because on a previous episode, we were talking about the new Netflix series that's going to be coming out and the amazing cast announcements that were made for the new He-Man series coming to Netflix. So that was one of the big motivators for why we wanted to review this documentary and talk about it on the show, because there is some He-Man buzz going on right now. Yeah. So one of the other things, that was interesting was that they talk a lot about the creation of the Filmation series and some of the things that people did on the Filmation series. The creator of Babylon 5, J. Michael Straczynski, is on this documentary because he was heavily involved in the Filmation version of He-Man, which is probably like the definitive He-Man to me, because I grew up with that. That was kind of like, I had the comics, the little mini comics that came with the figures, but I remember thinking, like, I used to think this a lot because, like, for instance, G.I. Joe, the comics were very different than the cartoon. And so with He-Man, I kind of had that kind of opposite thing. Like, whereas with G.I. Joe, I was like, the comics are the real version of G.I. Joe. That's really G.I. Joe. That's like war. That's like, I understood that enough. I was like, that's like war. But with He-Man, I was more like, no, the cartoon's the real version of He-Man. The cartoon is what He-Man's really like. You know what I mean? This stuff is a little weird. You know what I mean? That's how I remember kind of thinking of it as a child. But they do a lot of in this documentary. They do a lot of information about Filmation and the Filmation series. They talk with the voice actor who did Skeletor quite a bit. He's in this documentary. I guess they talked about something I wasn't aware of, which is that the actor that plays He-Man doesn't really do the con circuit, doesn't really do interviews. Apparently is very, very shy and just has never really gotten into it. You know what I mean? As far as doing that kind of stuff. So if people are wondering about that, I guess that's why you don't see him a lot at like cons or again, like interviews. He didn't participate in this project, which is a little disappointing, but I understand why. At least they had talked about it and they addressed why he's not in it. So that stuff happens with the documentaries. You can't always get everybody that you want or should, get, because sometimes they don't want to be involved. Avery Brooks wasn't involved with, What We Left Behind, the DS9 documentary. So there are little things like that I thought were interesting. We probably should talk about it. I'll be honest. I never got into the last animated series. I don't know if you did. It never really appealed to me. They do spend quite a bit of time on this documentary, though, about the last animated version of He-Man. I think that's the one that was on Cartoon Network, I want to say.
Yeah.
Did you watch that? Were you a fan of that?
I did enjoy the new version quite a bit. It was actually by the animation actually came from a company in Korea, and it's a pretty good He-Man cartoon. In all honesty, it's pretty good. It approaches the material obviously differently than Filmation did, but it keeps a lot of all the classic Filmation. When you think of He-Man, all those elements are there. So it's not as jarring as the live action film, for example. It rings more true. They spend more time fleshing out things like, they give Skeletor an origin. They talk about the fact that He-Man's mother is from Earth, which was obviously hinted at and talked at in the original Filmation, but they get right down into it and basically say that she was an astronaut from Earth who accidentally was trapped on Eternia.
Well, they did that in the Filmation. They showed that explicitly. They did a flashback about her, and she was an astronaut. And they even had a Christmas special where they go to Earth, and so that it's kind of an infamous, infamous He-Man Christmas special. But that was fleshed out in the original Filmation that she was an astronaut from Earth.
Yeah, I remember that, but I couldn't remember to what extent. It's been a while since I've seen that episode.
They even showed her ship and all that stuff. Yeah.
I actually do own every version of the Filmation cartoon on DVD. And I don't own the new one, but I did enjoy it. I was collecting some of the newer action figures for a little while from the new show. And then what I ended up doing was when they released the later ones, they talk about the ones that were aimed at the more, I don't want to say adult collector. That sounds weird. Or, older collector doesn't make me feel very good about myself. But anyhow, the later ones that they talk about, the Four Horsemen.
No, a lot of the later ones are definitely geared towards adults. They're definitely geared towards the collector's market.
So I have actually, most of them were gifts from my brother, who's been on the show. He actually got me because when we had a conversation one night, and he's like, so if you're going to own any He-Man thing, he's like, what would you own? And I was just like, well, I really like the newer sculpts that they were doing. And I said, it'd be cool to own technically the original Masters Universe line, because I bought Masters Universe figures way before the cartoon was even on the air. The first one I bought was actually Man at Arms, because I love weapons and stuff. And I just loved his look and like all the weird armor with the look like a respirator or whatever. Like I love that look and the mace. And
no, I always liked his armor.
Yeah.
I always thought his armor was really cool. Yeah.
So that was the first one I actually bought. And I bought it pretty much sight unseen. And I read the mini comic and I loved it. And I was just like, this is really cool. So I was actually buying the He-Man figures on the basis of just those mini comics and just the toys themselves. So for me, actually, the mini comics were actually the real story, and the animated cartoon was a little weird. But I told my brother, I said, well, if I was going to own anything, I like the new sculpts. I said, I'd like to own the original line. So my brother actually got me because originally Master Universe was 4 or 5 figures. So you had He-Man, Skeletor, Beastman, Actually, I think it was more like 6 because I think Merman technically counts in there. But I have
it's 8. There were eight figures, basically 4 on each side, depending on how you look at Zodiac.
Zodak. Yeah,
Zodak, because he was supposed to be like neutral or something like that.
Right. So my
Analog Toys has a great episode about the first series of He-Man. I actually watched it really recently, where they go through all the toys and stuff.
But he actually got me the entire, like, quote unquote original Masters line. So I have the 4 Horsemen sculpt versions of the original Masters line that's in like
cool.
The packaging that replicates the look of the original toys. I have all of those. But yeah, I gotten off track from the new cartoon, but I did enjoy the new cartoon. And just like the voice actors, I was a little shocked that it ended as abruptly as it did. I think if that cartoon had been on Netflix in the same way that Voltron Legendary Defender was on Netflix, I think the He-Man cartoon would have still been going. I don't think it would have ended as abruptly as it did when it was on Cartoon Network. You know, there's a lot of things that the networks give up on. They go, oh, this isn't working. And they just jettison it. And in reality, there's like these legion of fans that are going, well, wait a minute, I was watching that. So I did quite like the new cartoon. It was a bit of an update.
I honestly, it never appealed to me. I never got into the new one. You know, I think I tried to watch a couple episodes. Of course, that's probably after, I can't remember what year that came out. It was probably around the time that I was cutting the cable. I may not have had access to it at that point, and that might be one of the probably the biggest reason I didn't check it out much. But it just didn't interest me. And again, I'm the guy who's sitting there like, well, I like the New Adventures of He-Man, and nobody else likes that. So again, that's one of my criticisms of this documentary is I wish they had talked about the New Adventures of He-Man more, but I just don't think they liked it. So some of the people that they were talking to were closely involved with the new series and also the new comic books, which was kind of an interesting story, where they were talking about how they actually got a lot of fans to work on the comics during that era. That it was like a very much like a fan produced comic book. And they actually, one of the ways they were able to sell that was that they would take more established artists to do covers, but they were the alternate covers. Even the main covers were being done by the quote unquote fans, which I thought that was interesting. It makes me kind of want to check out those comics because I never was into them. I never picked them up, but I did find that story fascinating.
Yeah, the ones that were actually that Val Staples and I can't remember the Esteban. I can't remember his last name. Those comics are actually really good. I actually have all those on my shelf over here. I quite enjoyed that series a lot. They show that Boris Vallejo painting actually of He-Man on Battle Cat fighting Skeletor, and it's kind of an Earl Norem kind of looking painting. I actually have that framed. It's not currently hanging in the studio, but it used to because it actually hung above my Master Universe collection. I have a lot of my original toys still. I've still got Panther and Skeletor, and I've got a bunch of stuff, Ram Man. I've got a whole bunch of stuff still left from when I was a kid, and I would put those with the new stuff, and then I would have that poster above them. But no, the comic series is actually pretty much every version of the He-Man comic series has been good. The only one I'm going to diss is maybe not the later ones, but some of the early ones that DC was doing, not originally, but when they tried to bring it back, like in the early aughts, because Scott and I made a huge heavy pitch to be put on He-Man, and they wouldn't put us on it. So I'm not going to say anything good about that series. But
hey, by the way, just Dan's taking off. So, hey, Dan, just want to acknowledge you. Thank you for commenting. He says, got to go. Have a great night. Dan Stevens, thank you for commenting. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. But no, there's all kinds of wonderful content for He-Man. That's the thing. It's like, and the thing that was interesting about that is the fact it was fan driven. You know, fans were kind of behind that, and you can when you read those comics, you can feel that. You know, it's just got a different quality to it. It's intangible, but you can tell that people who love He-Man, you know what I mean, are producing this work. But yeah, I have a full collection of all those books. I really love them. So yeah, I highly recommend that series for people that are interested in it. No, yeah, I'm excited for the Kevin Smith, the Netflix series they're working on. It's got a tremendous voice cast. Um, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of possibility for He-Man here to have an interesting revival. So I think maybe the timing is right. We'll see. We'll see.
They did. They didn't really talk about the production of it, but they did show the a small, like 3¼ scale He-Man collectibles that have come out fairly recently. I think it's Reaction that does those, or Seventh
Yeah.
Wave, one of those companies. They have, like, I've actually seen those in comic book stores. They look really cool. What I like about them, of course, is that they're the smaller scale and they take up less space, because I don't have any space in my house anymore. And I thought it was neat they showed that. I wish they had actually, like, talked about them more. My guess is, as the documentary was made, those were, like, just coming out. And then
Right.
also, one thing I've seen in stores that they don't talk about in this documentary is they have the cartoon accurate He-Man series out, like, in the direct market at comic book stores, which are pretty neat. Like, it's like Teela really looks like the Teela on the show. You know what I mean?
Right.
Adam really looks like Adam from the Filmation show. I just wanted to talk about those because those are not mentioned in the documentary at all.
So Man of Sin has an interesting comment. I have an interesting response to that. I'm sure there will be Man of Sin. And additionally to that, I'll also add that if you enjoy He-Man, there's a series that's either just finished or currently still running. And what they've tried to do is take all the different versions of He-Man and say they exist on different Earths, kind of like the multiverse idea. And they're all coming together in, like, a big, huge final battle. I can't remember the name of it, but I've seen quite a bit of the art for it kind of here and there. And then they did too. I don't want to disparage, because some of the DC work they've done lately is quite good. I'm a huge fan of Freddie Williams, and he did a really, really great He-Man series that DC published actually just a few years ago as well. All of that content is really wonderful. So if you're a He-Man fan, I highly recommend checking out a lot of the newer content if you're interested in it, because there's a lot of great comics work currently being done. But then beyond that, I'm pretty sure they'll do something to support the Netflix series. And because, one, Kevin Smith's a big comic fan, number two, Kevin Smith's a published comic book writer, I think it would only make sense that Kevin Smith would want to have, like, a tie-in comic that would go along with this project. So I think there will be.
For listeners, Man of Sam's comment was, will there be any content, for example, comics, put out as a result of the new Netflix show? And
Sorry,
the bottom line is we're not sure. We don't really know for sure whether that's going to happen. I would agree with you. Being that Kevin Smith is involved, you would almost think that's a no-brainer, but you never know. You really never know right now. It all depends on the market. That would be what I would say. You know what I mean? How the market's doing. But we'll see. I think I actually remember when I was going through some of my old comics, I do think I had a couple of Masters of the Universe in those value packs you used to get, where you would actually have these reprints packaged together. You could buy those in toy stores and things like that. So I did have a few of those 80s era Masters of the Universe comics as a kid.
I had actually years ago, I actually bought my brother, because the first time He-Man actually debuted, he actually fought Superman. A lot of people don't know this, but the first He-Man story is actually a DC Comics Presents story, which is actually pictured in the background back there. But in that comic, He-Man actually fights Superman. Well, my brother loves He-Man, and his favorite superhero is Superman, and so I bought him that, like, 1 year. I think I didn't even pay $20 for it, because in those days it just, it didn't have a lot of value. And now that book is actually worth a pretty penny. So yeah, I should have bought 2 copies. I don't even own one. I just bought it for him.
And I don't think I remember that book. I mean, I was, like, really thinking about. I was like, do I remember seeing that book or anything like that? And I don't think I do. As a kid, remember seeing that.
Yeah, it's but no, I think there's tons of potential with He-Man, and this documentary, I think, just kind of reminded me of that, and I reminded me of aspects and things, one, happens in the production of a toy line and a cartoon and a comic book, but along those lines, also showing me things or reminding me about things I'd kind of forgotten of too. some of the more gimmicky, toys they created and stuff. It's just terribly fascinating. And the breadth of the line too, just the number of figures and all the different things. And it's just really, really interesting. So just to wrap it up, if that's okay with you, Eric, would you recommend this documentary on Netflix, Power of Grayskull?
Yeah, I would say if you're a fan of He-Man, it's a no-brainer. If you're not a fan of He-Man, it's still really interesting if you are interested in things like toy making and the process of how toys are made, interested in the process of animation, how animated TV shows are made. If you're interested in filmmaking, interested in the way that films are made, specifically with licensed properties and things like that. Comics, if you're interested in the way comics are made. I mean, there's a lot there. In fact, the only little criticism I could say is each one of those subjects could have been their own documentary.
Right. That's true. That's very, very true. Cool. Well, I would highly, highly recommend this documentary just for about anyone that may find it remotely interesting. If you're a creative professional and you're curious about sometimes how certain things might be created or how they might be cultivated or put together, I think this is an interesting story. There's a lot of do's, a lot of don'ts, from a creative professional standpoint in terms of like lessons to be taken from it. It's really, really interesting, and I highly, highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Do we think we're good for the outro or?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you're listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, I've been one of your hosts. My name is Dave Beatty. If you're curious to learn more about me, see some of my artwork, find links to social media and all kinds of other silly nonsense, you can find it at my website. That's at davebeatty.com. That's www.davebeaty.com. And no, you cannot buy that Black Adam sketch card because someone just won it on the show tonight. I want to thank my co-host, as always, for being along for this crazy long ride. Please, Eric, tell the people watching or listening at home where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
I'm most active on Twitter, and that is at BassGod14, BASSGOD14. You can see that in the corner of my little tile there. And so that's where I'm most active. That's also my YouTube, which you may be watching this on, and also the Twitter account is the Twitch account. The Twitch account is also BassGod14. So that's the easiest way to find me.
Very cool. Awesome. And I think should that be the last word, Eric, or do you want to highlight?
No, as we like to say, we'll leave our viewers with the last word. Bobby Chambers. Thanks, gents.